Yes, I Negusa Salam. This evening, the chaplain is out for a moment, and he asked me to do the prayer for this evening. So that's all the prayer. Yes, I. We give thanks and praise. We come in the name of the Most High. We give thanks to the Mother, the Father, and to the Great Spirit. We give thanks to all ancestors known and unknown. We are grateful for the Most High to bring us together, bring us into knowledge, so we may be successful. Bring us into our understanding, our inner standing, and our understanding of our greatness through our humbleness. We give thanks and praise for the opportunity to learn about ourselves, learn our story, share our love, share our greatness, and share the Most High. We give gratitude and thanks to all who have brought us into this current stage, and we do our due diligence to move forward into our next stages. Grateful and thankful are we that we may be servants of the Most High to change this path and be the catalyst for this new age and new era. Age and era back to customary ways of nature, ways of the Most High. So we give thanks and praise to Karamawi, Haile Selassie, Negus Negas, Zimek Zimir, Daniel Lam. Yes, I give thanks. Sila. Yes, I welcome in everyone. All right, right now we'll have our Minister Lazarus, Foreign Affairs Minister, coming this evening. We have a wonderful segment dealing with mental health. And because our people a lot of times have been plagued with some traumas that they need some healing from. And it takes a lot of work, a lot of good, diligent work, and a lot of love. So we're going to focus on that this evening. And a few things of reminders. Earlier, we played some music. That was from a few of our members who are in our musical unit. Our Sergeant of Arms was Daniel, and our 31st elect got a march. So give thanks to the wonderful times. You all heard the wonderful lyrics, and so look out for that, get some support. We also have some members, like member Raskamari, he got his CMOS in the Atlanta area. That is on Wednesdays at Vegan and Friends. Wonderful area to congregate, network, and get some awesome CMOS and some other products. We got some different things like some teas, and we got some body products and different items. So definitely check that out. So yes, once again, welcome in to our story, and we will begin. Bless the Lord.
Yes, I. Yes, I. Give thanks. Give thanks. Well, we're going to begin tonight on the topic that is burning through the hemispheres of social media: reparations and the psychology behind it. You know, this discussion started with me earlier today, and I was in a discussion with some people who were headfirst on reparation, and they were using the quote, "Give me my check, give me my check, pay me." And, so my question was, we're talking about reparations and healing and all of these things. So, sometimes you can want a thing in the wrong mind. You can want the things in the wrong mind. You can want the things in the wrong mind. If that is understood there, meaning sometimes when we first start in the degrees of knowledge, we first impede um, where we're at in the atmospheres of the degrees of knowledge in which we obtain. And as we set out on that purging process and that learning process and that learning to break the traumas and the triggers that have bound us, we train ourselves to move past the illusions of ourselves. So in the discussion, it was yelled, "Give me my check, pay me." And I said, well, listen, if a man rapes a woman, he rapes her continuously over and over and over for about 10 years. And then he decides to break her off, pay her. He gives her $500,000. Is it all good? Can they live in the same house now together? Is he now not a rapist still? Or is he not a rapist no more because he paid her? And so a suppressive mental state of being bombarded in commercialization and capitalization have us yelling, "Give me my check," in the dead mentality that we're still trying to heal. A thought process of such a nature without a strategy for reparations, because the goal is to repair the nation. So in some mindsets, people have the mindset that if the government just pays us all $100,000 each, we good. We could live in the house with the rapists. We okay. Yeah, he may decide to rape us a few more times, but they broke us off. So we good. We a nation now. So I ask you, do you find that mentality troubling in this time? That at this stage, we could conceive, our leaders could be on a perpetual cycle of just saying, "Give us our check." So that all we could do is spend the money back with the colonizer, the enslaver. Some of us may get some homes and have some extra bills and, be able to clear a little debt, you know, but we still in the house with the rapists. And the rapist has not changed. It just paid you. So I open the floor right here. I don't want to build too much of my thought process in it, but I'm going to speak on our reparations outreach programs and how they differ from this component of thought process. But I would like to hear from everyone on the call or people. What do you feel about that thought process? Did it dawn on you that that does not make sense? That we would accept the payment from our enslaver, our colonizer, and then accept to be oppressed in systematic racism continuously again for another 100, 200 years? And then what would we do? Come back and ask them for reparations again because they continued to do the raping that we knew they were doing before? Is that reparations? What are we yelling? The floor is open. Let's hear your minds. Talk black. Talk
Yeah,
black.
this is joy. That's not reparation because it's not repairing anything. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's not repairing everything. If you look at the definition of reparations, it's to repair, right? And you're not repairing anything. It's compensation if anything, but it's not repairing anything because, like you said, in an instance of in a household, the husband's raping the wife, he gives him money, he's still in the household, nothing has been repaired, he can continue doing the same thing. So no, that is not solving the issue, right? Because what's the goal? The goal is not to be abused, right? So no, that is not repairing the situation. That's like hush money.
Yes. Give thanks. Yes. Floor is open. Floor is open. Let talk black to me. Talk black to me.
But still a check, is not bad, you know what I'm saying? But it's not repairing the issue.
Quiet right now. I'm wondering, did you want the check? Are y'all saying because you're quiet right now? Y'all saying, "Hey, Laz, look, somebody talk back to me," or are you saying that they agree that you just would accept the check and we could just move on with this? Is that what we're saying? Somebody talk.
Nah, nah, not at all.
All
We
right.
should check and move on. Nah, we gotta come to them, right? Come with the authority that we have, to ask for what is ours with our authority. But not to ask, but to demand it. But not begging them for no check because you can't ask the one who offend you to pay up if their intent was to offend you in the first place. Not
So,
that.
would you say we've been letting a certain component of our mental health trauma and our desperation lead us in how we're defining this? Would you say that? How people have been defining it as just get the check? So,
Agreed.
okay, okay. Somebody else?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
yes, fire. Yeah, I would say, Russ, if they're gonna give a check, that would all depend on the person's ability to utilize the check. So really, that cannot be the way forward. Actually, to give individual people a check, it wouldn't give any it wouldn't be any progress because obviously there'd be people who just carry on in their same mental state of neglect and abusing themselves, and they will just take the money to use that and squander it. So that cannot be the way. That there has to be a more structured there needs to be a more structured program which would necessarily come from I or the people who are in receipt of the reparations or any check or any monetary value. It needs to go into a system. If it doesn't go into a system which is beneficial to all, then it would be like giving an alcoholic or a drug addict or somebody with who has a mental problem. Why they're in that state is because is a mental problem to be in that state. So you
Mm-hmm.
would just be giving them fuel to further carry themselves into a lesser state of
Oh,
of reparation or
yeah.
in their own self.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'd like to jump in. I also think when we talk about reparation, we need to talk about rehabilitation. We need to rehabilitate the mind, the psyche. Having gone through said traumas, you can't just dash money at someone and then, when they've been through trauma, like Russ Cypher was saying, they're gonna squander the money, because their mental, their psyche is off. So that needs to be repaired. That needs to be repaired.
So we have to change the environment and we have to place it in a system that will benefit us. That's what I'm hearing now. Good points. Very powerful points. We have to. We can't just say reparations and anything, and we're still in the same environment that is creating the traumas, creating the things. So even if you gave us the money in this state of trauma, and most of us are operating through it, we would lose it in our trauma state. Is that what are we all there? So we have to have a system, a strategy, a strategy to be able to properly repair the nation. So when we analyze this, and this just let's go a little deeper into the mental health. We've had leaders start a movement to separate, they call it the foundational blacks here in America, from everyone. Saying, oh no, we ain't with the Caribbean. Oh no, we ain't with nobody. We foundational blacks. We separate. Give us our own reparations. So you just want the check. And you so desperate for the check. You say, hey, we don't want all these other people tied to us because that's going to cut our money. You understand the psychology that is leading us? We've already learned from all of these years of Pan-African movement that we have to operate as one. It has to be, as His Majesty taught us, a collective security. A collective security. So when you start going backwards to saying, "Oh, I wouldn't," we don't work with that, brother. Y'all are people are saying they foundational blacks and they want their reparation check. But you're saying that if Marcus Garvey was here, you're saying that if all of these other Pan-African leaders was here, you wouldn't deal with them because they not what you consider a foundational black. See, so the psychology, the mental state that's leading us, and then the sight for comfort in a system that seems like we've been catching hell for so long. If we could get any component of some comfort or something that seems like, oh, we won for a day at least. See, so we still dealing with partial victories. Just like if somebody get a certain job, we think this is a victory, but yet we still are not dealing with strategies for power, strategies of true self-determination, strategies that can protect us from annihilation, strategies to defend and protect the next 7 generations so that they may be able to be free from the environment of oppression and terrorists. So when we speak about reparations, we're talking about, as our brother Cypher said, a system to repair and develop us into a sustainable nation or confederation of nations of people. How do we do that? We're not talking to the enslaved master to figure out a good price to pay us because they could never give us a price for our suffering. But now when we say, listen, we recognize that your delegation of authority today, not yesterday, not in colonialism time, not slavery time, we're talking about today. The delegation of authority that you implement over us is a claim that comes from the papal bull doctrine of discoveries. So you're still upholding colonialism and slavery. So now today, when we say that His Imperial Majesty redeemed us from the system of the enslaver in his declaration on June 15th, 1935, stating that he is the emperor of all of Africa and the king of all Negroes around the world. All Negroes around the world, including those in the United States. So, in overstanding that, now, you know, when Bob Marley sung the song, Get Up, stand up for your right. So now it's time to stand as an emancipated people, a people who have been brought under the sovereign umbrella of the Empire of Ethiopia through an ordained constitution by the Emperor of Ethiopia, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie. And we, the Black peoples of the world, wherever we are now removing to pay, stop removing our payments of taxes to our enslavers under what is called a tax residency certificate. When you go and start studying what a lot of the other countries have been able to do, you realize that they have been intentionally disenfranchising Africa and the indigenous people. You realize that there is a total monopoly game going on, and the game is rigged against us. So let's look at something real quick. All right. So here you see many U.S. treaty partners require U.S. citizens and U.S. residents to provide a U.S. residency certificate. In order to claim income tax treaty benefits and other tax benefits in those foreign countries. Now, I'm trying to think of where the page is. Well, let's go a little further into it. All right. To obtain a Form 6166, taxpayer must file Form 8802 application for U.S. residency certificate with the IRS. All right. I'm going to go all the way in this. Let me see. I want to go all the way into this. All right. Accept your cookies. What is the process for obtaining Form 61666? To obtain Form 6166, taxpayers must file a Form 8802 application for U.S. residency. It is used to request the Form 6166 to show certification of U.S. tax residency. Only authorized representatives can sign Form 8802. Examples of authorized representatives for a business entity includes officers, executives, or duly authorized partners. The IRS also requires specific documentations for particular types of entities. Legalization of Form 616. In order to use Form 616 in a foreign country, it must first be legalized. Okay? Legalization is a process in which various signatures or seals are placed on a legal or public document to verify the origin of the document and the authority of any signatures or seals. There are two ways in which to accomplish this: authentication, apostille, if the country in which your Form 6166 is to be used is not a party to the Hague Convention of the 5th of October, abolishing the requirements of legalization for foreign public documents, then you must authenticate it. If the country is a party to Hague's Convention, then you can use a more streamlined process known as apostille. However, each request for an apostille or authentication is complicated by the requirements of the destination country's consulates. All right, let me go simple because I'm about to have to read a lot for you. If the person is in from the United States and the United States has a treaty, let's say with Ukraine, and the company or the person from the United States is running the business or working in Ukraine and they're making a certain amount of money. Now, Ukraine can tax them. But before Ukraine would tax them, they would process the 61, 66 form with Ukraine to give them a notice of a residency certificate, meaning the residency certificate is going to authenticate that they are paying taxes in the United States so that they can't be double taxed and pay taxes in the Ukraine. So even though they're out of the country working, their money is still building their nation. So when you look at our situation, we talk about reparations, will our money be building our nation? No. So how do we make our money build our nation? Through a tax residency certificate. So what we've been working with is the kingdoms and queendoms of Africa. Why? Because our place of domicile, and let me pull that up so that everyone, sometimes we people to say words and use words, and we assume others know. Domicile, treated, what they say is in past tense, treat a specific country as a permanent home. The tenant is domiciled in the U.S., reside or base. He was domiciled in a frame house on the outskirts. I want to give you a more detailed. In Black Law's dictionary, domicile refers to a person's true, fixed, principal, and permanent home, the place where they physically live, consider their home, and intend to return even when absent. Distinguish it from a temporary residence or a place of business. Domicile is a person's legal residence or their home where they have permanent residence and intend to return when they're absent. So we're domiciled, as all of us know, that where do we come from? Africa. So our domicile is Africa. Now, let's go to the next stage. Let me do this first. When you're coming into the United States, and we're talking about this tax residency certificate, it's always based on a treaty tax. It's based on treaty countries. So what happens is you'll notice, right, in the United States particularly, that all of these countries that have like E1 treaty trader standards and can do tax residency certificate, they're non-black. The African countries don't have it. They've been getting robbed all of this time. So all of these Africans going outside of Africa, going to work, their money for their taxes on their money should have been going back to Africa. It's not. That's billions of dollars. But when Europeans come into Africa, they come in and they say, well, we're coming, we'll do business here, but we want tax incentives. So then Africa gives them tax breaks so that they could come there and develop, so they don't pay taxes. So Africa ain't getting the taxes from their people that's going abroad. And then the foreigners that's coming in the country, they ain't getting no taxes from them either. So then they say, well, why is these governments suffering? Why are they deficient? Why are they not like the United States and them? Oh, it's corruption. No, it's systematic. This disfranchising them. So now when we get to E1 treaty trader, make sure everyone can read this. The E1 non-immigrant classification allows a national of a treaty country. So you got to see what country has treaties with the United States, with which the United States maintains a treaty of commerce and navigation. So all of you know that's telling you maritime when they say navigation, or which the United States maintains a qualified international agreement, or which has been deemed a qualified country by legislation to be admitted to the United States solely to engage in international trade on his or her own behalf. Certain employees of such a person, or when they say person, remember it's talking about a person of international law, a state, a nation, or even you as an individual when you're operating in your official capacity, which we'll talk about again. Person or qualified organization may also be eligible for this classification. For dependent family members, see families of E1 treaty trader. Let's go a little further. If the treaty trader is currently in the United States in a lawful non-immigration status, they may file Form 1 or file Form I-129 to request a change of status to E1 classification. If the desired employee is currently in the United States in a lawful non-immigration status, the qualified employer may file Form I-129 on the employee's behalf. Now, general qualifications for a treaty trader. To qualify for an E1 qualification, a treaty trader must be a national of a country with which the United States maintains a treaty of commerce and navigation, or which the United States maintains a qualified international agreement, or which has been deemed a qualified country by legislation. Carry on substantial trade and carry on principal trade within between the United States and the treaty country with the which qualified the treaty trader for E1 qualification. Trade is existing international exchange of items, trade for consideration between the United States and the treaty country. Items of trade include, but are not limited, goods, services, international banking, insurance, transportation, tourism, technology, and its transfer. Some news gathering activities, CACFR 214.2E9 for additional examples of the discussion. Substantial trade generally refers to an amount of trade sufficient to ensure a continuous flow of international trade. All right, so let's go into the next stage. Now, the U.S. Department of State Treaty countries. So here's the listing of the treaty countries. Albany, January 4th, 1998. Argentina, Armenia, Australia. Australia has an E1, E2, and the E3. Austria has an E1 and E2. Bangladesh, Belgium, Bolivia, and we keep going. Canada has an E1, E2. Chile has an E1, E2. Colombia has an E1, E2. June 10th, 1948, Congo, August 13th, 1994. Congo Kinshasa, July 28th, 1989, Costa Rica, Czech Republic, Ecuador, Egypt, Estonia, Ethiopia. Ethiopia has an E1 and E2 treaty trader. Now, as we're going through this, I want you to tell me how many other African countries are you really seeing with this status? Now, I'm going kind of fast. So they have it, but guess what? There's maybe 3 African, I think it's 3. Oh, Morocco, I'm not even counting Morocco.
Okay, I counted Morocco.
Morocco has another status since they're Germanic Turks.
Okay. Egypt as well.
Togo, Russ, way up at the top. Togo was
Ethiopia, Togo, and the Congo are the places, and they did that really because they were ciphering so much out of Congo. But the thing about it is, the people who leave these countries don't get the tax residency certificate break that they're supposed to. Now, some of the Ethiopians that went from Ethiopia to Israel then came into the United States with the Israel passport, get tax exemption under Israel, but they don't get it under Ethiopia. So you have to understand what's going on. So when we're talking about self-determination, we're talking about working with the kingdom. So let me go on ahead and pull this up. Oh yeah, I was already there. Working with the kingdoms. So this is called the King of Kings Overland Missions. I'm not going to go too much into it. This is tied with our dealings with the King of Congo. But as you see, the King of Congo, another King of Congo, the Queen Basol of Congo. Now, this is all in the Congo, but this is not all in the Congo. This is Uganda. King Issachar Drani Stefan. This is in Uganda. This is in Ghana, Ghana, Nigeria, Niger, the Ivory Coast, Kenya, Ethiopia, Mali, which is Burkina Faso, South Africa, Swaziland, Senegal. So when we're talking about customary law and returning to an alliance with the kingdoms and the queendoms of Africa, we're talking about major alliances with the kingdoms and queendoms of Africa. Why are those major alliances with the kingdoms and queendoms of Africa so important to us at this time? Because when we were taken in captivity, when we were colonized, when we were enslaved, we were under kingdoms and queendoms. We were under customary law. So we don't return back to a government or borderline governments that were created by the Berlin Conference. we return back to the kingdoms and queendoms. Now, what happens when we are making moves on this level? See, we're making a move where we're not compromising any of the positions because it's important to understand every step, every move, because it's a strategy. So now you're talking about customary law. Customary law trumps the regular international law. Customary law was first. Remember, customary law came before the papal bull doctrine, these doctrines of discovery, in which they made these international agreements of commerce, which we now call international law. So the original laws of commerce and maritime, we have to go back to the Axumite kingdoms and the Phoenician kingdoms and study those in the terms of what you would call the maritime laws of the ancient days. So we're not trying to halfway untie the knot. You know, we're not going to untie our hands and leave our feet tied up. So when we say going back to the customary positions with the kingdoms and queendoms, entering into the treaty, the customary treaties with the kingdoms and queendoms, operating in a full capacity as a government and a nation as ordained by His Imperial Majesty. So now, in that aspect, we're going to them to give us domicile. Our statement of domicile, remember authentication. Our statement of domicile, our certificate of domicile comes from the kingdoms. That's our authentication. That's our apostille. That's our authentication comes from the kingdoms and queendoms. It can even come from the Ethiopian church. So now our place of under these jurisdictions, our place of back under the customary position is our now domicile is where we pay our taxes to. So we have what is created, and I'll pull this up first before I go back here. So what is created is a sovereign wealth fund that would not be just, we would have a real firm that's dealt with big accounts, major accounts, an accounting firm, major firm. So this wouldn't just be anything. So it'd be properly set up on the international banking level. So we'd have a sovereign wealth fund, and the taxes that you would pay to the United States, that you would be paying to your domicile, will go into this sovereign wealth fund. And when you pay that taxes, which you wouldn't pay the same amount as you pay in the United States or the UK, you probably pay 50% less. So more of the funds go back into the household for development. So it would go into a sovereign wealth fund, but you're listed as an investor. It's like a shareholder. And your taxes are documented to where they're invested in. So let's say in Africa, there's a gold mine or a coal mine or something of those nature, and they need funding to be to start it or get it going. But that gold mine, coal mine is going to bring a return of funds. So your funds are used then to invest into that and bring a return that then gives you a dividend. So you get paid every annually or 6 months under the process of your tax payments because they're investments into the development of your nation. So we've been proceeding under our colonizers for so long that we were just investing in them until they made it criminal if we didn't. But we never found it criminal that we didn't get a return on our investment. The systematic robbery of our life force, of making us, as they said in the Dumas Diversas, perpetual slaves. We were paying taxes to not be enslaved, to not be locked down. What people say today? Oh, boy, you better pay them taxes, boy. People come lock you up. A tactic of fear, terrorism has been used to take us out of the common sense of understanding of what we're investing in. So when you talk about funds being developed to create asset wealth and so forth, now you're talking about repairing your nation to sustainability, to a perpetual cycle of building wealth for the people. Because the people just came out of a cycle that just depleted them, that just destroyed them, that sucked the life force out of them. How are you countering that? By just saying, give me my check. So there has to be a strategical plan for reparations. So now all of a sudden, you, the people who were taken away, all of a sudden you become shareholders in the new infrastructure developments to help build up the waste management, build up the water structures, build up the solar power, build up the new houses in Africa and so forth. Now you're the shareholders, not foreign, not white Europeans who were part of the colonial. All of a sudden, the people who were taken away, who all of the theft, who lost their heritage lands, all of a sudden now, because of a tax residency certificate, now they become the holders of wealth in the sacred lands again. Reparations, restoration, wealth building. That's what the government is supposed to do for the people. It's there to serve the people. So we, the government of we, the black peoples of the world, the Ethiopian World Federation, move for restoration, reparations with a strategy. Tax residency certificate, our pathway to self-determination, our pathway to breaking the generational curses. His Majesty called us to become part and take part in world affairs. In this position of just saying, 10 million blacks around the world in 1 year would produce $25 billion. We've got to really realize our power. We fund nations. So how do we fund our own nation? Now, once we have 1 million people, let's say, partaking in a tax residency process, there's commercial paper that can be developed by the government to write off and be able to sign off and do any project based on the value of the future potential of the growth and funds in the sovereign wealth fund. Now you're not asking nobody for money. You're doing just like other governments. See, but we keep thinking that we're going to have a cook off and bake off and we're going to raise some money and all our people going to donate and it's going to be, it's not going to work like that. The people are already paying a government. They're paying the government of the oppressor. They're paying for their own oppression. Freedom from that. So the strategy of a tax residency certificate, of coming under the indigenous sovereignty. See, us moving in another capacity, we're not asking no one to give us nothing. We're paying ourselves instead of paying them. See, now you're building for the future. And you're operating to a system that is declaring you separate from their authority. You're not going back under their authority. You're declaring your position from under the authority and your authority to build your nation, your government. Well, Laz, how can we just assume that we got that power? Well, we do.
Can I comment?
Hold on one moment. So when you hear us start talking about everyone must read, everyone's got to read the Montevideo Convention. Now, His Majesty made a declaration that he is the emperor of all of Africa and that he is the king of all Negroes around the world, including those in the United States. And this declaration was done June 15th, 1935. Now, this language that we're reading is the same protocol language of rights and duties of states that His Majesty recognized and understood and knew when he made the declaration that he is the emperor of all of Africa and the king of all Negroes around the world. Now, this convention states, Article 1, what makes you a person? Remember, we said the word person of international law. when we were talking about the authentication, we were talking about the E1 treaty trader. So the state as a person, so the Ethiopian World Federation is a state. It is a government. Each local is a state, is a government, autonomously chartered under the parent charter that was given by a charter that's from the Empire of Ethiopia. So the Empire of Ethiopia chartered and gave delegation of authority to create other charters. And each one of these charters are a state. Now, they start off, but we have to say, well, what makes them a person of international law? The state, as a person of international law, should possess the following qualifications: a permanent population, we, the Black peoples of the world. I am the emperor of all of Africa and the king of all Negroes around the world. So all the Negroes around the world became a population under the king, a defined territory, we, the Black peoples of the world. But we were also given the land, which is called Shashamane. A government, that's our constitution, our administration, our bylaws in which we move under. And the capacity to enter into relationships with other states. So, for one, the first state that we enter a relationship with is the Empire of Ethiopia. But the second state, which we now are about to sign multilateral treaty aspects with several nations, several tribes right now. But the second aspect is the Ethiopian World Federation signing the treaty with the Lakota Nation, a federally recognized nation, government, sovereign body. So that meant that the Ethiopian World Federation met the four prongs. But our conversation goes deeper because we're talking about tax residency certificate. The federal state shall constitute a sole person in the eyes of international law. So we're talking international law. Article 3. The political existence of the state is independent of recognition. So let's look at here. The political existence. So now, politically, where do our taxes go in? Let's get a little further. The political existence of the state is independent of the recognition by other states. Even before the recognition, the state has the what? The right to defend its integrity. Do we agree to giving money to bomb people and children in Palestine? No. Our integrity is far greater than that. To defend its integrity, well, doesn't our Constitution for the Ethiopian World Federation says we are there to defend the sovereignty and the integrity, which is our heritage of Ethiopia, and the independence, the sovereignty of Ethiopia, and to provide for its conservation and prosperity, and consequently to organize, to do what? Organize. So how do you organize? So if we say we got to do our own taxation and so forth, to organize itself as it sees fit, to legislate upon its interests. What is our interest? Self-determination, breaking the generational curses, building our own sustainability that will last for the next 7 generations. Administer its services, and to define the jurisdiction and the competence of its courts. So we have developed our juridical, and we're going to show when we do our rulings on certain other things, the competency of our courts. But the exercise of these rights has no other limitation than the exercise of the rights of other states according to international law. So some people like to say, well, y'all ain't got no army and no navy to defend what y'all doing. It's not what's required. Let's go a little further. Article 4, let's make it clear. States are juridically equal and enjoy the same rights and have equal capacity in their exercise. The rights of each one do not depend upon the power, gun power, army power, do not depend upon the power in which it possesses to assure its exercise, but upon the simple fact of its existence as a person under international law. All right. So, first, no state has the right to intervene in the internal or external affairs of another. Now you say, well, man, they're going to come and tell us. How are they going to tell us if we're operating in our official capacity? What's your official capacity? You're doing the works of your government. You're not just out here in the street as an individual who's an individual activist. You're operating as a consulate. You're operating as a diplomatic representative for your government. So you're in your official capacity. So we're getting away from this individualism, give me my check. So I could ball better than the other ones, show you how I flip my money better than the other ones. Even though, yeah, we'll still be in the house with the rapists, I'm going to be living good. I'm going to be dressed good. I'm going to be fly. I'm going to be able to take vacations and get away for a little while, but I'm still under the control of the rapists. Empress Joy, you wanted to come in. Come on in. Come on in.
Yeah, I was just to veggie back on, the statements or the facts you were stating before, it's easier this way because most people already in the system, so just take from that system to put into our system. So it's very logical in terms of the tax residencies. Um, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like most people work a 9 to 5 or pay, they're already in that system. So it
Right.
makes perfect sense. It's harder to tell people to leave your system and come over here. So it's easier to say, okay, you're in the system. Let's use from that system to create our system and to add to our system. So, I feel that's the easier way than to tell people, stop what you're doing, come over, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I think it's a beautiful initiative and, ones and ones should get on this. Like, for real. Because you're already doing it anyways. Like you said, instead of giving to them, just bring it to us.
Yes. Yes. And that's why we need to build our list of participants. We need to have a list of at least 100,000 people saying that they agree to participate in this. And then we can automatically start the process with one of the states, one of the countries, one of the kingdoms in Africa, and then start directing tax funds into our sovereign fund account there. Also, funds that we will develop there would go also to help developments in Africa as well. So most of it would stay on diaspora side, but points of it would also go into there. And then the ones that's on the diaspora side will also become investments into the developments. So we would then be participating with Africa, which makes them do what? Take a stand with us to protect our human rights. As so it's been so easy for governments to turn their back, knowing that in the UK, in the United States, we were being abused. There was no interest. No one had to stand with us cost them more. And they were already trying to fight. They needed these people to invest. They wanted them to do what? Put funds with them. Well, guess what? We become the fund givers. We become the interest. We are doing this together. And we become what? Collective security. Collective security. Or, again, the question is posed, The floor is open. Before we watch this video, as we talk about this as in mental health, you know, some have ran head first, pushing the issue, but pushing it in the mindset of the mental health and not in a strategic aspect for independence, for liberation, for self-determination. Do we find it disturbing that we would just accept being paid by the rapists? Is our pain, is our suffering, can we be bought? Are we prostitutes for pain and for punishment by others? Can we be paid off? And then they can keep us as puppets to keep continuously doing the same thing? Are we prostitutes to the system? Is this what reparations has become? Talk back to me before we start watching this video. We want to talk about mental health, how it affects us, how many things that we think are normal are disease mind states that we are all struggling with, because we are in fight or flight. We want to figure out, what is this doing to us? How is it affecting us? Is it making us think right? Has it made us forget something about our nature? But again, do you think that the way we have been saying reparations, did it make sense that we would just take a payment from the rapists? Floor is open.
Yes, Russ. Give thanks. One thing I was considering, or thinking of as this as we're going through this scenario, and the governments, what we're actually are needing to create in a separate government, and using the traditional rulers of Africa, and maybe traditional rulers of other people, like you're talking of the Indian people, they have their traditional rulers. But how? And I'm not saying this in a negative way or in a way to throw any kind of spanner in the work, but how are the traditional rulers, will they be able, how would they be able, and how would they do it to become a separate economic entity to the governments which rule the lands which they reside? Because these the governments are actually in the house of the rapists, the government ministers, even the traditional rulers, even Nana Akufo-Addo. You remember him, who was the government. He's a traditional ruler. He's a Nana. Yet he was one. But he's part of the system. They're built into the system. So even the traditional rulers are still within. They're operating within the government structure of the land in which they reside. So their power is there, but it's nominal power. Well, I'm asking this really. As far as I'm aware, it's nominal power. The traditional rulers
Well,
within the land, the government of the land which they reside.
that's been the battle, meaning this is why you will always hear me explain that when we say diaspora, that the kingdoms and queendoms have been made diasporas in their own land. Through the Berlin Conference, the border lines have divided and severed and taken lands from them. But as we've been going through our process, and we say June 15th, 1935, His Imperial Majesty's declaration of emancipating us also emancipated the kingdoms and queendoms from the Berlin Conference. So they're taking the legal stances with us on these parameters, that this is their claimage also for their land back. Because if they're still implementing these borders claimages or stolen thefts against their heritage land, then it's still colonialism still going on today. See, we're not arguing about the past. We're dealing with the present. So our positions are challenging the delegations of authority being used against us. You know, some people say, well, once I do this, then I'm good. No, once you set this stuff in motion, you're saying you're prepared to go to war. You're prepared to challenge the system. You're prepared to fight. And you fighting are fighting for the people. See, so what it happens is no, it's not easy. No, it's still a fight. No, it's still a process. But we build the network, we build the unity with the customary kingdoms and queendoms, because under the Declaration of Human Rights, the treaties are binding, so they're contract bindings. So when you're studying law, you understand in this world of commerce, the only way you can hold somebody accountable or liable is through contractual agreements and laws. So what happens is in the past, there was no contractual, well, there was contractual agreements, but not with us. So when we talk about the implementation of the papal bull and so forth, and people argue in the past, they'll say, well, those laws, slavery and colonialism wasn't illegal then under their status, right? In our customary laws, it was illegal. But in their things, that it was not illegal. So when people argue these arguments in international courts or whatever they argue them in, and they argued in the past, they can't retroactive the law to the past. So what happens is if you argue for the past, they procedurally tell you they have no authority to deal with it. If you argued in the present, the authority comes that these countries now say that they're upholding human rights. So if we say that under the indigenous human rights, right, the delegation of authority that they're holding over us, if it be the United States, UK, whatever, and Jamaica, so forth, and these governments were created by colonial authorities, and now we're saying under the authority of the Empire of Ethiopia, under the customary law of because the Empire of Ethiopia, His Majesty is a king, customary law. So we're into that tribal construct. We're into that indigenous construct. So we're not talking just basic government. We're talking a customary position. So now we fall under customary law under the tribal constructs of the Empire of Ethiopia. So with that, and with the kingdoms and queendoms, we're coming back into Africa under indigenous law. So we're working with them. See, so most people would think, oh, well, yeah, the governments. But now the African governments themselves are bound by the agreements under the indigenous rights and indigenous law. So most of the kingdoms and queendoms have been making powerful moves in these last 3 years, which is about to come out before the world. And you're going to see the reality of what it means. And what's going to come out is also, it's going to show you how connected everything is. That's why we always go back to the King's List. And we like to go through the Ethiopians' King's List, and we show that when you get to a certain time period, you got Habasha, Abyssinia, and then you even get to a point where you're dealing with the terminology for Ham, Cush, and it goes into the Zing. And then you get into what's called the Zing dynasty. And they show you that the Zing dynasty becomes known also as the Rain Queens. And it goes into Zimbabwe. It goes into South Africa. It goes into Mali, and then you realize that this Rain Queens are also called in other aspects the Queens of Sheba, the Queens of Makeda. So then you find these kingdoms, all of these kingdoms throughout Africa are connected. They're all connected. They're one. They're all connected. And so now when we're really start getting into our, as our Constitution says, into that ancient Ethiopian history, that ancient Ethiopian knowledge, and we start to assimilate it, we're then educating the people on the many aspects of what this heritage, this history means to us, and all the aspects of indigenous peoples of the world. So the kingdoms and queendoms do have the power under indigenous rights and indigenous law A lot of power, more than what most of the time people recognize. Now, yes, the Europeans set up a system of capitalism that was still bound by a system that they controlled. So when you get into banking and commerce, the key to it was still attached to Europe. So then those who were coming into political power and everything, if they wanted to keep the country above water, they had to fold into the politics of Europe. And there was no breaking it. They didn't know how to break it. They were stuck in it. The ones that tried to break free, they watched them assassinated. So now, it's a new day. We're looking at the Ibrahim Torre. We're seeing that it's a new day. There's a new definition being yelled throughout Africa. And the kingdoms are a part of it. And the unification with the diaspora is also a part of it. So when we look at the aspects of it, is overstanding. It's just overstanding that we control the trade and commerce. Look at Trump, the tariffs and stuff. Africa, the kingdoms, and them have the same thing to do. They want to break the course. How do they do that? They do it with us. And the countries that don't respect us or don't handle us like that, they receive economic sanctions on the other ends through Africa. Even the governments are willing to partake in that because that's the politics of world affair and balancing the equation. But everyone needs the formula. They need to be able to see how to work it together so that they don't get slugged by trying to break the system or break free from the system and they don't have the support. We are the support. We are the support. We're the missing variable. That's why we said those who try to speak today to divide us and not bring us together, they don't understand what time it is and that our unity is power. Anyone else want to say something before we go to this pressing video?
Eli,
Yes, sir.
give thanks. There I mentioned
are linked by.
Yes, sir. There I mentioned 100,000 signatures, ones who are committed to the cause. Do I have such a initiative or a petition set up already?
Yes.
Yeah, how does one get to that? I love it.
Okay. What we were doing was putting out a basic social media to tell others to email us to say that they're interested. We send them. It's a one page, one little paragraph. All you're doing is putting a basic acknowledgement that you're interested in it. We're taking that petition. That's what the the traditional leaders of Africa and the indigenous ones are taking to the councils, and they're presenting at it, and they're presenting it as the potential of us being able to really develop the funds so that it can be pushed through. So then at that stage, we're pushing it through. We're working the politics to push it through, but we have to show that we have the numbers, that it's going to be worth it. It won't just end up being a political antagonization that will backfire on them because we don't participate in it. When they take these positions to offer this and they stand on it, then it's on us to complete the filings here. And what we're doing is we're not asking these people to give us reparations. We're dealing with our reparations from ourselves to remove ourselves from being what? Giving away our integrity to them by paying money to them to do what? Commit evil on the earth. We're removing that. So that is what every country in the world is doing. Every country in the world has tax residency certificate. As Empress Joy said, we're not really doing nothing that's not already done. We're implementing it with a purpose. We're redirecting it and we're advancing it to what? The diaspora, which they don't do most of the time. Why? Because the diaspora, most people are saying they're citizens of the United States and they just want this government to pay them. reparations. But if this government pays you, then they're repairing themselves.
Yes, I give thanks. Can I just put that information in the chat?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I don't know if the secretary are you able to send that document into the chat? I don't know if I don't think I
Not right now, but I can send our email. If you can shoot us an email, that'd be beautiful. I'll send the locals email, and if you can shoot us an email of your interest, and then we'll get that to you within the next, few days.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to put my email in the chat.
Yes, sir. Give thanks.
Sorry, if you can send an email to the
as
locals email, that'd be great. I'm going to send the email. So if you send an email to us, then we have your email on record versus putting it on the chat. And give thanks.
And we ask everyone to get as many people as you know. Just send it to them. Tell them this, hey, look, fill this out, send it back to this email. Let's get this number in. Let's build this up. This is our pathway to reparations. This is our pathway to self-determination. This is our pathway to building our true sovereign wealth as a people for our children, for their tomorrow, for our grandchildren, for their tomorrow. And as we do this, we don't speak about those in a negative, but we're talking about the state of mental health and how, if we're not in the right mindsets, we will move in a desperation caused by trauma. We won't be thinking. We'll be moving in a desperation based on the system, and we'll be giving away our birthright for breadcrumbs. So I hope you enjoy the words of our illustrious sister, Dr. Jewel Pookrum, as she speaks about dis-ease. For sometimes we move because we feel such a dis-ease. Sometimes we move because within our body, there's a dis-ease consuming us. But where does it all come from, and how do we overcome?
Their hands or certain parts of their body, truly the energy moves from one body to the other, and the energy begins to equilibrate. So that what one person is able to perceive and understand immediately is transferred to the next person, so everybody can get clearly what is being said. Does everybody have hands? Great. So I just want you to kind of just focus on making sure that you can feel the energy or the link connection to the person next to you. And just relax and know that this information really is very old and ancient to you, but we're going to be waking up some genetic memory and giving you some information about a wonderful new perspective as to how you can look at your imbalances or illnesses if you have any. And for those of you that have family members that are perceiving themselves as being ill, that you can really get a clear understanding as to really what's happening to them. So how does everybody feel? Does everybody feel connected? Okay, great. Okay. So why don't we sit down? So for those of you who feel it comfortable to write, fine, but I prefer, how you doing? I prefer that you just kind of relax. The flyer that was passed around the city has a lot of information that could be discussed on these very diseases, prostate disease and uterine fibroids and cancer, and there was just a whole list of stuff. One of the things that I knew about New York City many, many years ago, there used to be a man that, he's still here as I understand, a reverend that used to broadcast in Omaha, Nebraska when I was in medical school. From here to Omaha, and I still listen to him when I had the time. His name was Reverend Ike. I'm sure some of you might have heard of him. So in regards to what your personal opinion might be, he used to say something very interesting, that he used to always say that he never allowed the subject of his discussion to interfere with what he had to say. And so that's the takeoff that we're going to talk about today, because I want you to understand that all the things that are on the flyer definitely have a common cause and have a common solution. So whether it's in males or females, or whether we're looking at illnesses of children, one of the things that I've discovered is that the lack of understanding of what really composes a human being is part of the problem. as to why we don't understand what these disfigurements, these imbalances are in the body. I clearly understand that every experience that we have is an opportunity for us to grow and to learn more about ourselves, and truly is an initiation into our God self. Now, please pay close attention to what I'm saying, because when you look in the dictionary, if you look at what the definition of a God is, it is actually a title that is bestowed upon a human being. It is not the proper title to give to that creates all things known and unknown to us. That's a totally different entity. And as a matter of fact, God essence or Godship is part of your destiny and part of your birthright. In the world of physics, there's been tremendous amount of information that's been expressed mathematically to talk about the unlimitedness relative to the energies present in this dimension that we can absorb to transmute, to transcend, to become all kinds of things. But this energy, this light, literally, can only be assessed with proper consciousness or thought. There's something that we are very concerned about in making sure that in our community that men, and especially the women, begin to understand that there are laws that govern this dimension. And irregardless of whether we are aware of them or not, we still are accountable and will always experience their effects. So when we are living in our own world and we do not understand these greater laws that sustain everything, we really usually are living in opposition to them, and it is the stress, the resistance, and the out of alignment with these laws that govern everything that are responsible for a lot of the discomfort, a lot of the perceptions of inadequacy, etc., that we have. There's nothing that comes to this dimension that does not already have a space in time created for it and has not been endowed with a divine gift and talent that, based upon its mentality, can allow it to be the most wealthiest person in this dimension or the poorest. So when we begin to interview people in my office where they really do not understand that they're here for a specific reason with specific gifts and talents that are innate and natural, that flow through them, and that there are people waiting to give them whatever they might want for these talents. There are people waiting to supply them with the resources necessary to provide the talent, etc. And they really begin to feel that they're just out here on their own, that they have to compete. Just a litany of very debilitating, how can I say, non-esteeming concepts. Immediately disease begins to enter into the vehicle of that individual. Now, let's get a clear understanding of what it is to be human. Most of us are still walking around thinking that having a physical body is what composes being a human being. That is a component of being a human. But the greatest attributes and the seed immortality for being a human comes from the mental and emotional and soul bodies. Now, people walk around talking about spirituality, etc., but when we talk about this from an energetic level, and when we look at what the spirit is, it is actually a force that an individual creates for themselves based upon a particular type of lifestyle that involves interaction between the mental and emotional body. When we begin to sit and listen to people who come to us with diseases in their physical body, the first thing we begin to note is that these individuals have no rapport at all with their emotional body. They don't know what they feel. They don't allow themselves to feel. Or what they do feel, they recognize that they force their body to do something totally contradictory to that. When we are listening to their values and their belief systems, when we ask, why do you have this value? Why do you have this belief system? It isn't anything that they necessarily are truly rooted in wanting to believe for themselves on many instances. It is because of either inherited values and belief systems or assumed values and belief systems because of the numbers of people who are saying and doing the same thing, that they just accept this as a norm. However, the bottom line is that when they recognize that what they espouse and what they believe on a mental level is totally in conflict to what they're doing on a emotional level, and then they force their body to do something totally different from the mental and emotional body, it is real. Now, how is it real? And this is finally what's coming to the forefront. There is a science known as psychoneuroimmunology, and this is something that I'm very fascinated with and have decided to dedicate the rest of my life to, because very few of us are recognizing that the etheric aspects of ourselves, our emotions, our thoughts, become physical when the brain processes them. The mind and the brain are a total separate entity. The emotional body and the brain are a total separate entity. It is a factory, the brain, that is responsible for taking high vibratory frequencies, which are thoughts and feelings, and translate them, actually transform them, I should say, into a chemical reality. That chemical reality is then released from the brain into the bloodstream, into the fluid that encompasses the spinal cord, the cerebral spinal fluid, so that every cell in your body knows what you are thinking. Every cell in your body chemically knows what to do then to create the corresponding feeling based upon the communication between the mental and emotional body. Now, I will say this once more because it is extremely important that you understand this. Your brain is, again, a tool, a factory that is responsible for making available to the cells of your body the information that is being radiated from the mind, which are thoughts, and also allowing you to experience the sensation that your thoughts provoke in your emotional body. So that means then that if you decide that you want to have a less than loving thought about a person or a situation, immediately you will notice that you immediately move into discomfort, because by creating those kind of thoughts, the discomfort and the discordance that you create, the disharmony, immediately affects, first of all, the originator of the discordance. So can you imagine people who are walking around who have these opinions of many people, who have these opinions of relationships that they've had in childhood, interactions that they've had in high school, situations that they might have had on the job, and they are talking about events that have happened 15, 20 years ago. This is a chronic excretion that is being made by your own brain every day, moment to moment, that is now released upon your cells of your body. The cells in your body now have to process this every day. So you really get a big boost of this when there is a person or a reminder of the event that then really comes into play. Because as long as you have not come into a feeling of being comfortable with the experience, the subconscious or the right brain is constantly throwing off that same remnant of thought that is constantly stimulating the brain to produce the corresponding neurotransmitter. So if you just begin to understand what I've just said, you can understand why it is going to be impossible for the tissues to look like they did 15 years ago or 20 years ago, not just necessarily because of the quality of food that you're eating, not just because you might not be exercising, but because of the internal pollution that you are constantly creating of your own free will that destroys your own tissues. Now, see, you have to understand how profound that is, because when we talk about immortality, when we talk about agelessness, when we talk about infinite vitality, these things are real. It's already been proven. This is 94. In 1990, there was a German that received, a Russian that received the Nobel Prize for proving that mammalian tissue never ages as long as the internal and external environment remain constant. So you have to understand that's awesome. So that means that if this is really true, this gentleman took a heart and kept it alive for 25 years. And the electrical current that was able to be carried by the muscles of the heart were exactly the same the first day he isolated and 25 years later. So the time period was not a factor at all as to the deterioration of this tissue. As long as he was able to make sure that there were proper nutrients on board and that the actual energy carried by the muscle did not deviate below a particular standard.
If you remember last week, we spoke about keeping your charge. Elijah means to raise up Jah. Elijah told Elisha to carry the staff and don't stop along the way. Keep your charge. So in this aspect, we've been living in an environment that impedes our charge. So we have to learn to be more resistant to those things that impede our charge. And the resistance begins in the mind, in the visualization of the self, of the mind. You know, the spiritual aspects of what we're dealing or what we're speaking on when we say, just give me a check. You know, we're dealing with a lack of true understanding of the value of self. And we're talking about a mental illness. We've been so devalued that any little taste of what we conceive or what we've been taught is value, we'll trade it all for. So before I play this video any further, I'm going to play it again. I want to read the words of His Imperial Majesty. And this speech is the opening to Parliament, November the 2nd, 1964. This is His Imperial Majesty's speech on the path of progress. And what we're speaking about in the construct of tax residency certificate, a foundation, you know, it is collective security. It is public welfare. So let us read the words of His Imperial Majesty. We must caution you that lasting progress can be built only on deep and enduring foundations. See, so we don't want to give me my check because that's not going to be a lasting progress. So we're not going to sell our birthright for a morsel of bread. So let me read this again. We must caution you that the lasting progress can, we must caution you that lasting progress can be built only on deep and enduring foundations. A strong and viable economy, expanding programs dedicated to the public welfare, the application of modern science and technology to the solutions of the problems which face us and the improvement of the way of life of our people. But these in turn require an increasingly mature, rational, and responsible attitude of mind and spirit, manifested in the approach which we take in the exercise of our rights and obligations, in the manner in which we search for solutions to the problems of our daily life, and in the way which we arrange our relationships with our fellow men. It is this mental attitude which is most essential if our nation is to continue to prosper and develop. We must become increasingly self critical, increasingly willing to analyze our efforts, to experiment, to admit our failures as we take pride in our successes. We must draw upon what is valuable and meaningful in our history and tradition and merge this with the best in modern learning. Create a uniquely Ethiopian base on which to build. If the foundation which we lay today are not sound and strong, they will surely crumble tomorrow, and the future development of the nation will be in danger, and our efforts, however well intentioned, will have gone for naught. Laying a foundation, critically thinking, strategically thinking, to create the solutions, build the public welfare. This is what we're speaking of, and not allowing our traumatized mind to make us sell our birthright for a morsel of bread. So before I start back the video, would anyone like to speak on the words of His Imperial Majesty?
Elia, just a quick question. Can they repeat where that was taken from? I love it.
On the opening of Parliament, November the 2nd, 1964. Parliament for Ethiopia.
Give thanks.
Yes, sir. Anyone else?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I would just like to highlight. I mean, I don't know if I need to highlight this really. I mean, I take it that everyone would have picked up that His Majesty's choice of words are very psychological. You know, it shows His Majesty's understanding of human psychology and how far in advance His Majesty's thought was to even establish the Constitution and the ways, and these speeches are indicative of his intention. You know, that's what I pick up from that speech. I mean, it's profound. You know, I mean, it's only when you put it into the light, you know, of the lesson that's going on today, and you put His Majesty's speech as an umbrella or as the light to shine on what the eye is saying. Yeah, I just want to say, Russ, it's profound, you know, and to see it in this light is very enlightening and educational. Give thanks.
Yes, I give thanks. Floor is open. Anyone else? Okay, let's begin. Let's learn a little bit more from Dr. Jewel Pookrum. She's actually still in Atlanta as well. Give thanks.
So if this is something that can really happen in a test tube with all the other unknown phenomena that allows us to have energy by breathing, by being exposed to the natural environment, by actually being in the presence of other human beings that carry a higher frequency of energy, which always means that you'll be able to receive energy from them, then how can you explain the aging process, deterioration, illness, and death? It has to be something that is provoked from within. We find that the simpler people who have been classified by certain cultures as being retarded or very simple in mindset, for whatever reason, they age very slowly, if aging at all. They basically maintain their vitality and are able to be, centurions without any effort at all, as opposed to the individuals who feel that the lifestyle that they have is stressful, that they feel that they have to always watch their back, they can't trust the people that they're around, relationships don't work, etc. I mean, they're out of here by 60 years old. So I think it's very important to begin to understand that the diseases that we are now dealing with in the hospital institution originate from an internal, endogenous, as we say, source. And one of my biggest concerns is the consistent resistance that the present hospital system exhibits in wanting to look at the lifestyle and the values and the perceptions of individuals that come in complaining of disease. We have been able to identify many diseases that are truly invoked by states of consciousness: asthma, heart disease, narcolepsy, cancer as one of the main ones, arthritis. I mean, and the list goes on and on and on and on, that we can identify a definite personality type that has particular belief systems, that have particular feelings that they actually emote or create, that now exhibit in the tissues and create these particular defects. There's a book that I acquired about 2 months ago that was a whole study that was done by Harvard University that had 2 chapters on how disease was a learned behavior pattern. It's understood that illness is learned. It is not a natural concept, and it's not a natural phenomena that human beings are supposed to experience. It is learned. The second chapter behind this chapter, entitled Illness as a Learned Behavior Pattern, was, are you teaching your children to be ill? Which was very, very interesting, because then they began to elucidate how certain behavior patterns in the parents, certain communications, and also the exposure to information such as watching TV and recognizing that supposedly if you overeat, you're supposed to have an upset stomach, and then you're supposed to take Tums, or if your nose is running, then that automatically means that you have a cold, so therefore you've got to have NyQuil or whatever else, and if your eyes seem to be stinging or whatever, then that's a problem. Now you have to have, eye drops to put in it. All of these things are actually behavioral in teaching adults, and especially children, that X leads to Y. Okay, Y leads to Z. So therefore, it appears to them that this is a normal, acceptable behavior, even in the face of discomfort, that they are to accept. Now, I think that one of the things that is most phenomenal is the fact that we still do not recognize that because the capacity to be here indefinitely, physical immortality is a reality, but it also requires, just like everything else, a state of consciousness and a lifestyle. And we have to accept that. It's just like anything else. If you're not willing to basically understand the technique to generate the phenomena, you can't have it. It's just that simple. So the idea to just assume that you don't have to do anything but just sit there like a bump on a log and you're going to be here for 200 years is inappropriate. So if the goal is that you want to be here 200 years, 500 years, 800 years, fine. That is truly a capacity that the body can give you without question. But to be able to do that requires, first of all, a consciousness, and then secondly, a lifestyle that allows the body to utilize its energy in the most efficient and effective way. So when we get involved in activities that are not efficient, that are not effective, obviously this is not a person who truly has long-term intent of being here for an indefinite amount of time. Well, what are those activities? And most of us are very much into a lifestyle that truly will not even allow us to live 70 years, let alone 300. What could they be? The eating habits. Not necessarily even the quality of the food, it's just the timing that people eat is automatically suicidal. Depending upon the structure of the individual, because there are 4 types of humans on the planet. There are 4 basic genetic structures that I want to talk about. Truly, they all have different metabolisms, different diets, different lifestyles are created for different activities and have a different relationship with the sun. So when the sun now becomes the main core energy source, the relationship with the sun and understanding when you have high time energy that you can draw upon to actually help you metabolize, help you think, help you get through a particular activity, and when you don't, is extremely important. A good example of that is truly in the melanin dominant, because melanin being an encapsulation of all of the known and unknown light spectrum truly resonates from the sun. So when we begin to utilize our bodies in a way that is antagonistic to allowing ourselves to ride with the energy that's on the planet at any particular time now becomes a problem. It is a known fact that for all organisms, because the sun is the sundial for what's happening in this dimension, that there's a time and a place for everything. Everything moves in a rest and a motion and a motion and a rest. So these are just basic understandings that one has to understand about themselves on a day-to-day basis. When, for example, that we eat, when we know that the energy on the planet is the lowest, there's no sun, there's no heat, etc., but we eat a meal that is extremely heavy, and then we ourselves do not assist the body in allowing that food to be able to pass through the digestive tract, sit in a tremendous amount of stress on the body. I don't think many people really recognize, and there's a test that we do known as live cell, that when they eat this way, large particles of food actually pass through the wall of the digestive tract and go into the bloodstream. When that happens, that immediately kicks in the immune system to have to handle this foreign body. And on our TV set in our office, we are able to see undigested food having to be phagocytized by your white blood cells. Because if it is allowed to continue to just stay around in the bloodstream, just a whole toxic reaction occurs. So that if the little fibers or fingers that are on the walls of the digestive tract are not assisted in absorbing those nutrients and processing them, then when it goes through the wall of the digestive tract, your immune system now is consumed with having to eat the residue. Now that means then that if there's bacteria present or there's other pathogens that are in the air, etc., they are not available to take care of more threatening activities because they got to eat the residue from an indigested or undigested meal. So now therefore when we start having symptoms of feeling just tired, lethargic, anything in the air and in the environment seems to bother you, many times we can also identify that these people have terrible eating habits and they do their largest eating at nighttime after the sun has gone down. That is a no-no. That will truly sap your life force energy very, very rapidly and really have you in a serious state of health, usually by the time you're in your late 50s or 60s. But by the time you look at the condition of your body, you've actually lost a lot of your youthfulness and resilience. The idea of not understanding that the concept of creating a self-defrosting refrigerator or an auto-cleansing oven, a self-cleansing oven, is no more than the human being that created it really creating themselves. Auto-cleansing or self-cleansing is a natural phenomena of the body. It is known as purification. And the purification process is where the body will increase its body temperature. It will automatically turn on its own heating system to liquefy toxins that have accumulated in the body. Once they are then turned into a liquid state, they are immediately removed into the lymphatics to be removed through the lungs, through the kidneys, okay, and out of the body. Now, modern science, however, wants to say that having a fever is pathologic, and immediately you're supposed to stop the process. What happens then when you take the Tylenol or whatever else you want to take to actually turn off the liquefying agent, you immediately allow these solidified toxins to stay in the body longer, which eventually produce the cysts that we have, whether it's, they told you there was a lipoma, they told you there was just a cyst here that was just right. Well, that is actually stagnated waste that was not allowed to go through the purification process to be eliminated from the body. When we again, once these toxins have been liquefied, do not then allow ourselves to eliminate them properly through the breath by proper breathing, proper exercising, allowing ourselves most of all to sweat. This is a real big problem. Then they begin to re-solidify, but you have to remember they've already been moved to the lungs. This is what has happened with most people when they're diagnosed to have pneumonia. Pneumonia is an interruption of a purification process that did not allow, the person did not allow this process to go into completion. So yes, we do breathe in bacteria in the air. And when we have this waste that does have sugar in it, it does have protein in it, etc.
Now I'm going to keep this video going, but I want to say as above, so below. As within, so without. Coming into the Ethiopian World Federation is a purification. It's a purification to return back to a pure black consciousness. That's why the Constitution says, assimilate, teach them the ancient Ethiopian ways, the ancient Ethiopian history. Bring them back into their black mind. See, but things that have accumulated on us, congealed within our blood systems and cause sickness in our beings. See, we're purifying them, we're breaking them down, but many of them will still pop back up in the next cycle. You know, when you get ready to go through your breathing cycle. But see, then we know in our breath cycle that if you're not breathing right, then you're still in fight or flight. So we know that we have to check the mindset to see if it's still operating from the trauma component. Are we in true, has our breath been liberated? Are we speaking from the liberation point? Are we speaking from a congealed, traumatized point? Has our consciousness still been poisoned by the trauma? Are we still carrying it? Have we purged it in our process to liberation? So as within, so without. So we're talking about reparations, repairing, healing the nation. Seeing the mindset, seeing and saying we're going to purge, being critical upon ourselves so that we can accomplish the mission as His Imperial Majesty rightly guided us in. So, yes, you hear the science and you hear it about your body, but as above, so below. What happens in your body is a reflection in the mind, and the operation in the mind is our living reality. All is mind, the principle of mentalism. Give thanks.
That is now sitting there in the lungs, this is real breach of a purification process that did not allow, the person did not allow this process to go into completion. So yes, we do breathe in bacteria in the air. And when we have this waste that does have sugar in it, it does have protein in it, etc., that is now sitting there in the lungs, this is real food that this bacteria that we've inhaled can live off of. So it appears as though that there is a viral or a bacterial pathogen that is the reason for the pneumonia. That is not true. The reason for the pneumonia is the fact that there was an elimination, a purification that attempted to take place, and the individual, by their unwillingness to pay attention to the symptoms of the body, and first of all, to rest it. It's like we know that when the refrigerator is defrosting, when the stove is self-cleaning, we don't try to bake on it, and we don't try to put food in the refrigerator to be refrigerated. Okay, we let the process go through the whole motion, let it clean itself up, and then we know now that we can put our food back in the refrigerator, that we can now continue to cook on it. But now when these processes of a runny nose, the temperature goes up, etc., do we then immediately put ourselves in a resting position, trusting that the body knows what it's doing and has the capability of taking care of this process? No. We've got to go to work. We've got to do this. We've got to do that, etc. And as all of us know, the statistics state that every 2 minutes somebody is dying. But now, has that really changed the quality of your life? And has it really interfered with anything that you're choosing to do? No. Which means then that if people are dying every 2 minutes and we have an agenda for ourselves that their moving off the planet does not change what it is that we want to do. There's something else, even if they were the bus driver, the cab driver, whatever else, there's somebody come along to still get you where you want to go or service you. So the idea that all of a sudden the world ends because you don't go to your job, or, you know, life starts because you're not willing to honor yourself, immediately puts you in the range of the individuals who also are going to be going to the graveyard. You're going to be one of these 2 people every 2 minutes that's going to be leaving here. Excellent example is as we came out the office yesterday, there was a taxi parked in front of the hotel. And the doorman just kind of says to us, well, yeah, this cab is here because the cab driver slumped over on the wheel and had a massive heart attack and died. So, you know, the ambulance was making noise behind us, but, you know, I didn't really pay much attention. But it was because they had just pulled the man off the steering wheel and threw him in the back of the truck, and he was on his way to the morgue. Now, there is no way that this gentleman did not know that he was having problems with his heart. The heart just never ever stops like that. These people always have symptoms. Indigestion for long periods of time, heaviness on the chest, ringing in the ears, pain down the arm. He had all of these symptoms. I know that he did. But now his unwillingness to recognize that his body was giving him signs and symptoms that it needed to do nothing more than purify itself is now the fact that he'll never drive another taxi again. And, of course, 1 hour later, somebody else came and got the taxi, and they're driving on. So it's very interesting that now, because people have lost the esteem of self, the value of how important you are, that there's a whole industry to help you even repress all these symptoms so you can get to the job. So when you turn the TV on, from the time you turn it on, they're telling you to take Dristan for this, something for that. And all of these symptoms that they're addressing are symptoms of purification and elimination of waste. So this is very, very dangerous when you recognize that there's a whole industry that now has been created to making sure that if you're not aware of the natural cleansing process that your body will go through, that you can actually pay to feel better on your way to the grave. You'll be actually paying to feel better on your way to the grave.
Now imagine that with reparations. Imagine that with reparations. There's a whole social media, propaganda, government propaganda, all to keep you from your purification, all to keep you from seeing your emancipation, all to keep you from seeing the truth in your unity. All of that. And they'll even pay you big money to ignore your purification, to go against your unity, to go against your liberation. They'll pay you. But they'll pay you to come back into the valley of death. They'll pay you to come back under their systemic racism so that you could live in a poisonous state of fight or flight, a mental devaluation. And then that causes you what? So much mental trauma and feeling that you trying to eat to feel better. So eating habits become sicknesses because of thought processes. So are we just trying to say, give me the bag, give me my check? Do we want to just get paid to go back to the graveyard? To be corpse? To be lost at sea? To be chattel? Or do we really want to purge, heal our being, free ourselves, return to our inner peace, our shalom, our rest, our Islam, our hotep? As above, so below. As within, so without.
So when of the natural cleansing process that your body will go through, that you can actually pay to feel better on your way to the grave. You'll be actually paying to feel better on your way to the grave. So when the aspirin stops the temperature, when the pain relievers stop the aching pain, etc., what is actually happening in your body? And it's very important for you to understand that your body is a gift. It is the greatest tool that has been given to you. It is not your enemy. It has no intentions of wanting to abandon you. It has no intentions of wanting to bring pain on you. But if, like anything, you don't take time to learn how it functions, to learn what it does, what it should be doing, and how to care for it, how can you get the best out of it? It's like a person who has a wonderful automobile but has not taken any time to learn what it needs for maintenance, how to get the best mileage out of it, etc. They find that they don't have a good rapport with it, and eventually, if they don't pay attention, it can definitely cause them to lose lots of money, and most of all, it can cause you to lose your life. An automobile was not built to do any of these things except to be able in comfort and in style to get you from point A to point B. But it is the rapport, the lack of rapport, that causes all this other stuff that people are experiencing. We have to stop putting it on the automobile, or we have to stop putting it on the drugs, blaming the drugs. We have to take full responsibility that our unwillingness to have a value on understanding what our relationship is to ourselves and what it is that we expect to have as a quality of life is very, very, very important. You know, we have people that they eat some very interesting things. And, you know, we talk about the fact that you can be here indefinitely. Immortality is a reality. But now it's just common sense. You don't have to have, you know, any extensive IQ to recognize that you cannot eat dead and denatured food and not have to finally use your own life force energy to metabolize it. The key is that at least you want to be putting things in your body that break even as far as energy goes, or actually gives you more energy than you feel that you have at the moment. And we see many individuals that will eat things that by the time they're able to gnaw this stuff down, they are totally unconscious. Totally unconscious, which has automatically told them that what little energy they did have that allowed them to be able to get this into their mouth and chew it, it sapped all of that. That's all gone. You know, and we've all been victim of this because we didn't have this information. I mean, this is one of the things that really woke me up about having to make some changes in my life that truly were not introduced to me because of my home environment. When I was doing my residency, I had my OB stint, and it was intense because I was on 36 hours, off 12. And so those 36 hours, I had to be awake and able to respond to women coming in labor, women coming in with symptoms in the emergency room, and having to deal with any problems that were on the postpartum wing. So I recognized that when I wasn't busy and I had time to get down to the hot lunch table before they closed, that when I could get my favorite piece of meat, which was beef, that the rest of my evening was over. And I would recognize on days when I got so busy that the hot lunch line was closed and all was available was just raw, fresh salads, you know, some Jell-O, whatever else, etc. And I stopped eating Jell-O a long time ago when I figured out why the cow's face was on the box. You know, I recognized that I had energy still to be able to get through the night. So, you know, I didn't feel full eating just a salad, but I recognized that I still had surplus energy that I could function. So I made sure that I really was able to finish up everything, and I just made sure I ran in at the very last end to get this piece of meat. They used to have these beef on bun sandwiches, you know, these lots of this rubbery beef on these big onion rolls. So, you know, I got this, and of course, when you're a surgeon, you don't have time to do much anything, so you just kind of gnaw the stuff down real quick, and I went back up to the unit. So we didn't have anybody in labor. Everything in postpartum was quiet. There was nobody in the emergency room. So I said, well, fine, you know, no telling what will break out tonight, so I'll take a nap. When I came to, it was 2.5 hours later, and I, in my mind, had only been asleep about a half an hour. No problem, but when the nurses came in and said, oh, you know, we tried to wake you up on about 3 or 4 occasions to sign some orders off, and we just could not arouse you, that was very frightening. Because that meant then that if somebody had to came in bleeding, if somebody had to come in ready to deliver, that I would not have been able to assist them. I would have been just totally incompetent to rise to the occasion. And I was very concerned about that, and I said, well, you know, do I have some kind of disease? What's going on? I mean, I can't finish this residency if I can't be able to be aroused at the proper time. And I had never done this before. So I went to the endocrinologist to find out if I had some kind of endocrine problem, was in my thyroid or whatever. So his thing was, well, you know, you could lose 10 pounds, but otherwise you're fine. Now, did that help me at all? No, because I recognized that I had a problem because I still did not have an answer for not being able to be coherent and be able to be aroused for 2 hours out of my life. And people are expecting me to be available to assist them. So I said, well, let me just pay attention to what was going on at the time that this happened. And it was very clear to me that, again, this did not happen to me when I did not eat beef. So I said, well, let me do the experiment, because I had never heard of meat causing these kind of problems. That had never been ever taught to me, never said in medical school or anything. But I'm just going by what my body was telling me. I said, okay, well, let me not eat any more beef and just see what happens. Lo and behold, it never happened again. So I was like, that's really interesting. I said, I won't tell this to anybody because they won't believe it. But I just will recognize that, I have an allergic reaction to beef, okay, because that's what we're just going to say this is. So then I started noticing that I started getting drowsy when I ate chicken. So I was like, oh, now that's real interesting because, you know, this sensation of wanting to just kind of sit down and be quiet and not feel like really wanting to think a lot was starting to occur with chicken. So I said, well, I think I better leave that alone. So I stopped eating chicken, and that never came back again. So I would eat fish, and I started having a craving for a lot of protein, so I started eating cheese. As a matter of fact, there was a wholesale house in Detroit where you could get pretty good quality cheeses very inexpensively. So I would buy 5, 7, 8 pounds of cheese, and it would be gone in a week. So I was like, oh, that's, and I loved it, no problem. Nobody ever told me that this stuff wasn't good for me. But, I love shoes. So I looked down at my foot one day and I recognized I started getting this bulge at the base of my big toe. And I was like, oh no, there's just no way that I could just be getting a bunion. I could not even understand that. So, I just said, what is it that I'm doing that I did not normally do that would cause this phenomenon? See, I was just not willing to accept that this is just something that just happens and you just move on. Now, whether that was my vanity, I don't know, but I just was not going to accept the fact that my toe was supposed to turn inward on its own. So, therefore, it came to me that, I was eating all this cheese. I mean, you're eating 5 to 7 pounds of cheese a week. So I said, well, let me just not eat this anymore. I said, okay, we'll give this a little experiment. In 2 months' time after I stopped eating cheese, my foot straightened out. This lump went away. So I'm like, oh, this is real interesting. So I recognized that animal products, flesh, and their byproducts were something that I could not include in my diet. If I wanted to stay healthy, if I wanted to stay alert, and most of all, if I didn't want my body structure to actually change. So this was still my own personal experience. I didn't necessarily equate this to other people's. And I just kind of tell you the story to let you know that from my own experience, how I felt, what was happening to my body, I recognized that there's a direct correlation with the foods I was eating and the changes that were happening to my body, which were degenerative. Now, there are many, many things that can cause these same phenomena, but what is the underlying factor here? The underlying factor is that I was eating foods that had minimal energy in them, that was causing my body to have to give up its energy, where the normal natural phenomena keeping my body static was not able to occur anymore. It actually was putting me in a negative energy deficit. So obviously when we eat food that comes out of a can, when it's frozen, when it's day old, 1 day, 2 day, 3 days old food, it has no energy in it. It has no energy in it. And so when you eat that food, you will actually recognize that it will usurp your life force energy. These are really important basic laws that you have to remember if you want to talk about not aging and actually being here for long periods of time. The key is to be able to be appropriately aware of the accountability of how you're using your energy. It's an equation. You have X amount of energy. You also have X amount of resources to draw energy on, so that upon or from, so that you don't have to use your own. And if you're not paying attention to what has energy, that by the time you eat it, you have been able to restore your energy from digesting it and absorb extra energy, then you're going to have problems. And it's really that simple. Now, what I find is so interesting is that the structure of the African, because they are what I call sun dominant, or have the capacity to absorb a tremendous amount of energy from the sun, that they can eat foods that have basic minimal nutrients and be able to use them completely. And the amount of death that we have, the amount of deterioration and aging, is totally in opposition to the innate capacity to be here indefinitely. But I also recognize that being in an unnatural environment, not understanding how to properly cope and adjust to an unnatural environment, that is, that living above the 42nd degree latitude for Africans automatically cuts you off of a tremendous amount of sunlight. And then not understanding the need to have to honor the fact that you come from an open air society. We need much, much more air. We cannot be in very closed type places like Caucasians can, because they've been conditioned to live in areas with high carbon monoxide for thousands of years. We cannot do that. So when the windows are not open, if everything is sealed down, when there's no light, etc., and most of all, when there's a lot of dust and debris around, it takes a tremendous toll upon us. So these are just basic things that one has to understand, and it's a necessity to expose ourselves to as much sunlight as possible. Now, these things have already been documented, so why aren't they taught to the children? It is because one is that the parents obviously don't have the information, and two, the schools that our children go to are not geared to teach them from a perception of who they are as the norm. And that is a parental responsibility. is that it is very important that whoever you're teaching should be taught what they need to know to be the best they can be, not what is best for somebody else, but for them. So when we have teachers who are then also ignorant of who they are, that actually look like the student, then we've got a serious problem here. Now, I just want to go back to this purification process, because again, when this purification process could not complete itself, that this liquefied waste could not leave the body through the lungs, through the colon, through the lymphatics, it then now resolidifies and will then relocate itself in the body. Now, why does it perhaps locate itself in the lungs or in the arm or in the leg or in the prostate or in the uterus, etc.? Well, now that's a very interesting phenomenon, and we have begun to understand that truly the location of disease, waste in the body, is due to the perception of the mindset of the individual and their emotional body. For example, prostate disease. Prostate disease is a reflection of women who have true issues around accepting their nurturing capacity. The uterus on the physical level is the innate resource for nurturing. It is the first house for an incoming soul, and it will take care of that soul for 9 months until it is able to stand on its own, which is known as birth. The uterus and that capacity to nurture also has an emotional body, and it also has a mental body. And we notice that women who do not appreciate the nurturing capacity, whether it's on a physical level, have also emotional and mental issues around nurturing at all. We ask them about their relationships with their mates. They're strained or either totally void because of the inability to deal with differences in relationships that have allowed them to feel less than loved and hurt. We find that there have definitely been issues to decide if they would even allow their uterus to be a incubator or a nurturing chamber, and have had usually one or more abortions. As a matter of fact, the Afro-American women in this country supply the most placentas and the most fetuses for the cosmetic and research industries. There is definitely an issue around the African woman recognizing that her life force energy should be used for something that she truly believes is something that she should be doing. When we sit down and talk to these women with uterine fibroids, the jobs that they perform every day are jobs that if they were to really ideally be living their ideal life, they would never even think about performing. So the understanding is that whenever you're involved in something, exchanging your life force energy, that is a form of nurturing and sustaining. So for the woman, everything that she's involved in is a child, whether it's preparing a meal, whether it's writing a letter, whether it's making a garment, whether it's, performing a job for someone else. All of these are actually her children. So therefore, when there are ambivalences about the proper use of this nurturing energy, whether it's with her children, with her mate, or on the job that she is, the thoughts that she has will actually now be attached to the physical internal representation of that part of the body that actually is the prototype for that type of activity. Does that make sense? So therefore, the physical uterus is the prototype for nurturing on whatever level. And when there's issues around the proper use of that energy, then now her reluctance to want to be accountable for the honest and direct use of that actually puts that organ under psychic attack. Therefore, the brain translates that ambivalence, that emotional mental conflict into a substance, and the uterus, being sensitive to that, is now having to deal with the collection of toxins that creates. So we have identified that obviously having a hysterectomy is totally inappropriate, and these women go on to have a tremendous amount of other side effects from that, because the disease, which is a mental emotional conflict, was never treated. Taking Lupron, which is a drug that actually turns these women now completely into men. They totally can't nurture anything, because nurturing of sorts is not actually a male characteristic. Okay, sustaining something is, but the actual art of creating to manifest is not a masculine trait. So now they totally become men. So we have a real issue here. They get secondary sideburns, hairs on their chin, the whole bit, lose their cycles, etc. That is not an appropriate treatment for this kind of disease. And only when we're able to help these women recognize that their unwillingness to accept their normal role as a female and what that really represents, and to be actually able to be accountable for the use of their energies, is when the tumors on their own resolve, because they then allow the normal purification process to complete itself. So uterine fibroids is no more than an attempt of a purification that has been arrested by the resistance of a mind and an emotional body to come into alignment. So when these women are willing to leave the jobs that they know they don't want to be on, when they're willing to recognize that obviously if you withhold, you have to be withheld from, so you can't expect someone to give you something that you're not willing to give, that is, that you don't trust your mate, you don't trust the person you're involved in, then how can he completely submit to you? That's ridiculous. So, you know, we form all of these perceptions here on misconceived information that basically causes us to produce these toxic states that cannot be totally eliminated from the body. The same thing with prostate. Prostate definitely deals with men who have issues around whether they are actually performing and functioning in the role as a man. So now we go to an esteem issue, because whatever a woman is to you and whatever a man is to you truly is a chemical reality in the bloodstream. And if you say that, you know, your name being, you know, John Johnson, having male genitals is not a man because you have X, Y, and Z, or you can't do A, B, C, D, you automatically then set up a psychic attack that chemically begins to attack those organs that would make you male. So obviously cutting out the prostate is not the answer, because it makes you impotent. It definitely diminishes the sperm count. Not because the testicles are not making sperm, but the sperm can no longer be directly deposited in the woman's vagina because now they get distributed into the bladder. That's what happens. When that happens, now it also makes you prone for autoimmune diseases because the sperm and your bloodstream have never met. So in the bladder, when the sperm now has access to the bladder, because normally it does not, when the capsule of the prostate has not been interrupted, the bloodstream is like, oh my goodness, well, what is this? We've never seen this before. We have no idea what it got to be, a foreign invader. So now the immune system becomes activated, and little missiles, which we call antibodies, now are made against the sperm. And wherever they're coming from, the missiles are activated to destroy that area. So then we see these men begin to have all kind of funny problems go on, etc., because of the fact that they had misperceptions of who they are and how they should function, which is something that needs to be purified and clarified within the communication between their emotional and mental self, not to be repressed with a drug. They give you estrogen for this, not to have it cut out, you know, but to actually deal with the mental emotional conflict. But now I think this gets very interesting, because when individuals are not recognizing that it is the mind and the emotions that determine the contour, the shape, the actual action of the physical body, they think that they can really start playing games and that they don't have to actually speak about what they're feeling and thinking, and nobody will know. Now, this has been one of the greatest charades that I've seen this century, is that whatever you are thinking and whatever you feel is determined and exhibited by your physical body. So when you are excess in emotional ways, oh yeah, you're going to be overweight. There's no way. These are truly emotionally burdened individuals. And there's no way that you can tell me that you're not sensitive and that you are definitely not carrying a lot of emotional stuff, because that is what fat actually represents. Okay, individuals who have these huge, big chests, that's all they do is go lift weights every day, etc. These are very insecure, inadequate individuals that use this as a means of shielding their emotions. So when you see a person walking around the street like that, you know that they definitely have deep-seated inadequacies. And this is a means of them attempting to compensate. So it's like, okay, this is real interesting. You can't hide your emotions and what you are thinking. And it's only because if people don't know how to read their own physical body or other people's physical body that they basically get snafu'd, I guess, and, you know, letting these people tell them something totally different when the evidence is right there in front of their face. So, you know, just sitting down and having a conversation with these individuals will let you know that, you know, their inadequacies or their misperceptions or their low self-esteem. I mean, this all comes out. So you can see anger on people's face. There's no way that you can tell me that you're not angry and you can barely open your mouth because your teeth are so gritted to say hi. And I'm supposed to believe that you're not angry. Okay, you understand what I'm saying? So it's like there's no such thing as a secret. So the idea that you feel that you cannot talk about these things that are bothering you, you're saying them anyway. They come out through your physical body. But unfortunately, the way that they come out, it disfigures, it distorts, and it destroys. So by the time you get to the grave, we knew all your issues. That's the point. We knew all your issues. You cannot hide. There's no such thing as secrets. You know, and sometimes I have people come in and it's like, well, you know, you're talking so loud. I don't want anybody to hear or whatever. And it's like, oh, that's real interesting. It's like, have you looked in the mirror lately? Okay, it has nothing to do with the tone of my voice. It's like everybody who looked at you knew something was wrong already. You didn't, you know, I mean, there's no such thing as a secret. So this exclusivity or this idea that we think our stuff is so secretive that we can't talk about it, it is really a joke, and millions of people are dying every day thinking that they're keeping secrets. I mean, just to show you something that's very interesting, you can look at a woman's pelvis, you can look at the contour of her thighs and her legs, and you can know right away if she's been sexually molested in childhood or early adolescence. You can just look at her pelvis. I mean, these women that have tremendously knocked knees, their thighs rubbed together, etc., they have been sexually molested, and the psychological trauma of that has totally shifted the pelvis and the fat distribution to actually make a barrier to get to the perineum, the vagina. That is not how you're normally built. This is because of sexual molestation. And I'm telling you that when these women are willing to open up, they all give you the history that they have. They just, for whatever reason, felt that they could not, but their bodies told it. So I'm just saying that we just have to stop playing the games and recognize the greatest gift that we have is this physical body, but it talks. It communicates all the time, and when you take the time to really be sophisticated about what your body is exhibiting to you, you can always recognize that it really originated from the mind and from the spirit. What is happening with cancer? Well, having had cancer, which was a wonderful initiation for me, it is the scourge for the liar. Now, my grandmother used to always talk about if you lie, you'll steal. I just never even understood what she was talking about. But I do understand this, that you do rob yourself of a high-quality life not being willing to be honest with yourself emotionally and mentally. And I have never sat with a cancer patient who was not living a lie. The job they worked on, the relationships they were in, the relationships with their kids, it was just, it's all contrived. But their low self-esteem and their need to be recognized and accepted by whatever they think out there is going to make them a better person is what they get up and strive to actualize every day, knowing that they hate it. So they continuously do this, that creates this toxic bloodstream that then causes these toxins to solidify in the body because they interfere again with the purification reaction, and they're out of here. So when these individuals are finally recognizing the fact that, you know, it's a choice between going to the grave, being a slave to something or someone else, or finally beginning to allow yourself to be the real you and let everybody else know what that is, those are the ones that are able to recover and never have any problems. But it is truly a choice that they have made for many, many years to stay in relationships, to stay on jobs, to have relationship with children or spouses or whatever, that they know that if they had been in their right mind or living their ideal self, they wouldn't even think about doing. And they think that every day anyway, but they still lie and keep up the front. So you cannot have this disfiguration and think that it is not a reflection truly of what's going on with you emotionally and mentally. I just want to say one last thing about esteem, okay, and I did some little research on that and just looked it up. And esteem is actually a value. It is an estimate of something. And when we talk about self-esteem, we're actually talking about a value. When we look at what the definition of self is, it talks about interest. And I thought that it was really interesting that when I looked up the word interest, to have interest in something requires you to have a feeling about it. So self-interest means that you have to have a feeling about yourself, one that allows you to give yourself a value, which is an esteem. So when we define ourselves as something that when we think about our name or when we look ourselves in the mirror, that we automatically go into a discomforting feeling, it is the foundation for addiction. Now you want to know why people are addicts? That is why. It is because when they think about themselves based on the definition, the value, the esteem that they have assigned themselves, they automatically go into pain, and to get out of the pain, they use a substance or an activity. Now, see, you have to understand how much low self-esteem there is on the planet. So it has nothing to do with whether you drive in a big car or you wear $100,000 suits, if there's such a thing. It has something to do with the fact that when you look in the mirror or you recite your name to yourself, you automatically go into pain because the value of what you think you are does not make you comfortable. Now, this is all self-inflicted. It has nothing to do with nothing outside of you. So if you decide that being a black man in America is a horrible thing, then obviously every day you wake up, you got to do something about the pain. Oh, but this is real serious. You've got to do something about the pain. So therefore, when I wake up and recognize that my name is Joe Blow and I'm a black man in America and I don't have this and I don't have that and I don't have the other, then it's like, yes, where's the pipe? Where's the marijuana, etc., and we'll sit this day out. That's exactly what's happening all over this country. It is because the perception of these individuals is such that they create their own emotional pain and they want out. So now the treatment is not obviously gathering up all the pipes and getting rid of all the cocaine and marijuana, because the people are still in pain because they still are perceiving themselves in less than an ideal way that creates a discomfort in the emotional body. So the treatment has to be to ask these individuals to redefine themselves and give themselves a different value system. It's real simple. So why would a person think that being a black man in America is a problem? Now, I mean, we just should just literally dissect that. Why would that be a problem? Do you know anybody cranking out black men in a meal? Of course not, because it is a divine state of existence. Only the Creator makes those. Which means then that if that's where it comes from, it has the characteristics and attributes of the source. Which means that being a black man in America means that you are a divine entity. Now, understanding what that means now goes into your own value of what the Creator would be. Because if that means that now you have dominion over the planet, that you have the capacity to do anything that you so put your mind to, etc., now that puts you into a whole different reflection of self. So you don't have to sit up and beg anybody and tell them that you need certain gratuities or, you know, I can't think of the name of this stuff that they use for going to college and all this other stuff. You don't need these crutches, because when you understand that you're a manifestation of the Creator, you can learn anything you want to and any time you want to and apply it. So you don't have to apologize for this. Being a black woman, I mean, this is the same issue. You know, well, I'm a black woman, so that means da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, obviously, when she overeats or when she's actually smoking drugs herself or marijuana, or she's basically a workaholic because she thinks that working 24 hours is going to make her a better person, or she's got to play the lotto every day, or whatever else this is. All of this is because her esteem of self is less than what the body and the emotional body knows that it should be. So taking away the lotto, you know, firing her off her job, whatever else the situation, none of that treats the problem. It is the fact that she has to redefine who she is, change her name, or give herself a broader definition of self and be able to actualize that. But the idea that something divine now having to be apologized for that's inadequate is totally a problem. And you have to understand the women maintain an industry, $18 billion a year in straightening their hair. Now, see, you have to understand that is a real problem because, first of all, it totally takes her out of her elements that she needs to be able to be here on the planet. You can't stay in the sun. You can't be in the rain. You can't be in the wind. You need sun and water and wind. So what do we have here? We have an addiction. That is an addictive process. So if you wanted to equate the crack pushers and the hair salons on the block, they were probably of the same number. And we have to deal with that. Now, there's no Koreans, anybody else, or whoever's making this synthetic hair, that definitely is like what the Creator has given you. So the key is that there is a self-imposed low esteem that causes these individuals to go through this discomfort on a regular basis. It's discomforting. You should see what they go through in these hair salons to get that stuff done. It's discomforting. And there's no need of lying about it. And, as like I said, it's unnatural. You cannot be your natural self and sustain it. So therefore, it's like that automatically takes you out into a different element. And I learned that a long time ago, and I just really had to let that go. So I had to redefine myself. I had to move into a different awareness of what I meant to myself and why that was not going to be an issue in my life, because I felt that if I could not face myself as how I was created, it was a personal problem that really meant that there was always going to be a block.
Minister Laws, the audio for the video gone up.
Yes, sir. Eli, Minister.
You should be back on in a minute. One moment.
Greetings. Raskimian.
Yes, I couldn't hear.
Yes. Is he aware that the sound is out?
No, I'm trying to contact him right now via text. But it might take a little while. So at this moment, floor is open if anybody wants to comment on the video just now. Floor is open.
Yeah, I'll go. I like to say I agree with a lot of things Joel Brookram is saying in terms of the body, how it reacts to, certain traumas, and trauma could be what we're eating as well. And I can relate to, what she's saying. Like the body really it tells a story, you know what I mean? So ones almost have to be mindful, and discovering ways to heal from our traumas, whether they be physical or mental. But even if it's a physical, even if it's a mental trauma, it manifests in the physical. So I think she's on point.
Yes, I agree. Great aspect. Anyone else?
Greetings. Can they hear right?
Yes, I couldn't hear. Go ahead.
Yes, yes. It's true. Blessed love, everyone. It's very interrelated, you know. What we put in our goodie is a temple that embodies the wholesomeness of ourselves. As the King James version of the Bible said, human being was created in the likeness of God, you know. So similar to our thought pattern, the way in which we think about ourselves, as she rightly said, and the way in which we think about each other, and the way in which we approach these thinking. Um, we talk about the golden rule: do unto others as you'll have them do unto you. Each thing that you put in your goodie represents something, it symbolizes something, and it radiates outward, inward, outward. And so it is imperative that we as a people recognize the importance of what we intake, the food, the air that we breathe. Sometimes we are in environment that we are not able to avoid some of the toxin that goes into our goodie. But when we are able to, and as she rightly said, sometimes we intentionally become, um, she didn't use that word, but probably lazy sometimes. And for my own sanity, I kind of connect it to the various trauma that we have gone through as a people. And particularly, she emphasized the womb, the woman, you know, and that she spoke about identifying the different type of trauma that we go through and how it reflects outwardly from a physical perspective, from a psychological perspective. And I keep saying it over and over. I growing up within the Rastafari community, really and truly. I usually term it as double jeopardy, because we've become traumatized systematically, and also from our biological family sometimes, because of the misunderstanding of the diversity and the dynamics within our culture, And so those are some of the trauma that we encounter, and it draws our mind because it's not functioning in a clear and effective way as it's supposed to draw our attention to sometimes unhealthy food and unhealthy behavior. And so I recognize it. Our Secretary Ayata Joy state that she can, personally relate to some of what she just expressed, and myself as well. Lots of trauma, and a lot of it are right now concentrated into denial, and so we're not able to address some of the emotional challenges that we're experiencing, And so it's good to have these kind of engagement, understanding ourselves, and have a space where we can share some of the emotions. One of the things that I'm seeing existing within our community is the lack of trust. And trust is so important. The lack of the love, and we lash out on each other, the persons who are closest to us in many instances. And so it creates a greater gap between the relationship, and then all kind of psychological turmoil start happening within our space, because we have inhibited our ability to communicate with ourselves and others in a more effective and healthy way, because of how we are perceiving some things and the kind of food that we're eating, that encourage certain kind of behavior, unhealthy behavior. And if you eat certain kind of food, healthier food, it will encourage, in most instances and in most time, healthier behaviors and communications, I'm just sharing my understanding of some of what I've heard since I got on. I got on a little bit late. And yes, but we give thanks. I hope Minister Lazarus will be able to come open forward the mic. Has they been able to touch base with him, Baskimian?
Yes, I am back on. I just got to change.
Yay! Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, then give thanks. I'll close my mic.
Yes, sir. No, I was listening. It's great reasoning, and that's the reality, is that we have to have these discussions, before we sometimes we run off in directions, based on the trauma, based on the desperations of, we've been so devalued, and that's why we say we'll sell our birthright for a morsel of bread just to feel a certain value. So they're tricking us. They devalue us, and then they toss out a little bit of value, and they see if you believe this is the value of your life, which is a piece of fiat paper that is called the IOU. It's not backed by gold nor silver. So we now are being tricked and stimulated by paper trickery, spells, and we don't take the time to heal ourselves and reevaluate what is our true value. And that's why liberation, that's why self-government, self-determination is so important for us to defend, so that our children can have a life of true self-value from under the oppressor, not under the oppressor. As Rastafari say, we don't want to understand, we want to over. So we want our children in an overs position. We don't want them under this no more. So then that comes to our self-esteem. That comes to the, if we've been so triggered by the fears of going through life and not having, and that we'll give any moment just to have a little bit, some money to throw away, because that's what most people's mindset is. Some are, yeah, I could just finally be able to have some money for a home or something like that. But most are, it's going to be money to throw away. And then some, they'll take, let's just say, a repatriation sum of 100,000, and they'll go put 50,000 down on that home they want. But now they still got to make payments. They still got to pay insurance and so many other things that they are still not equipped to do. So we have to really set up what is the real tomorrow. And that's where we're saying when we talk about reparations, we're talking about healing. We're about healing the being, learning to breathe again. Many of our people don't even know how to breathe no more. We've got generations that don't breathe. That's why the statement by the brother when the police were putting their knee on him, he said, "I can't breathe." We haven't been able to breathe for a long time. That's fight or flight. That's fight or flight. We haven't been able to go through a purification. So people say, well, why the youth acting like this? They're crazy. Well, we haven't been able to go through a purification. We're still being inflicted by the poisons in our blood through fight or flight, through low self-esteem processes, through systematic racism that keeps us down. So they disease our mind so that they may be able to break our force field and disease our body. See, you have the force field, but the only way a vampire can come into your house is if you invite them in. So they trick your mindset to invite this vampirism into your body. Babylon system is a vampire. Vampire. Sucking the blood of the sufferers. The sufferers. Well, what's the key to a vampire system? See, they say you know a vampire because of what? Because they don't reflect their image. But you say you are the image and the likeness of God. And the minute that you don't reflect that, your life becomes consumed. Your life force is consumed. You need to suck the life force of other people to live. Capitalism, commercial competition, not collective security. It's a vampire system. I got to get to the bag. I'm going to show these fools how I do, and I'm going to live my best life. Individualism. They taught us tribalism or collective security. In the urban areas, they call it conspiracy. Oh, the psychological games of trauma being inflicted upon us. It's called biological warfare. Why is it biological warfare? See, because the bio is the bio. If I tell you to write a bio, I'm telling you to write the story of your life. So if somebody tells you logic, they're talking about the logic of your life. So they trick us with the logic of life. They devalue us, so then we're always fighting for value. You know, today, what's the statement today all over social media? What you bring to the table? They got the black man and the black woman who in the midst of a war is trying to genocide them. And they're going to start a competition of what you bring to the table. We're going to devalue each other. So we're forgetting the mission at hand. But we've been taught that this is the key to us feeling a certain type of way. It's a competition for the stage. They've confused us. So the mental poisoning, the food poisoning, the mind poisoning, it becomes the key. So when we speak on reparations, we're looking for solutions that will pull our people out of those traps. It's not just give us a check, leave us in the trap, leave the rapist in the house. But long as the rapist play, you good. So your trauma is for sale. You prostitute the trauma of yourself and for your children for a payment. That's not our reparations. We see the suffering of our people. So we must learn to bring life. Let's look at the last statement on the video, and then we'll just open the floor. I do want her to complete this video. So just hold on one moment. It's just a little bit more.
Treatment is not obviously gathering up all the pipes and getting rid of all the cocaine and marijuana, because the people are still in pain because they still are perceiving themselves in less than an ideal way that creates a discomfort in the emotional body. So the treatment has to be to ask these individuals to redefine themselves and give themselves a different value system. It's real simple. So why would a person think that being a black man in America is a problem? Now, I mean, we should just literally dissect that. Why would that be a problem? Do you know anybody cranking out black men in a meal? Of course not, because it is a divine state of existence. Only the Creator makes those. Which means then that if that's where it comes from, it has the characteristics and attributes of the source. Which means that being a black man in America means that you are a divine entity. Now, understanding what that means now goes into your own value of what the Creator would be. Because if that means that now you have dominion over the planet, that you have the capacity to do anything that you so put your mind to, etc., now that puts you into a whole different reflection of self. So you don't have to sit up and beg anybody and tell them that you need certain gratuities or, you know, I can't think of the name of this stuff that they use for going to college and all this other stuff. You don't need these crutches, because when you understand that you're a manifestation of the Creator, you can learn anything you want to and any time you want to and apply it. So you don't have to apologize for this. Being a black woman, I mean, this is the same issue. You know, well, I'm a black woman, so that means da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, obviously, when she overeats or when she's actually smoking drugs herself or marijuana, or she's basically a workaholic because she thinks that working 24 hours is going to make her a better person, or she's got to play the lotto every day, or whatever else this is. All of this is because her esteem of self is less than what the body and the emotional body knows that it should be. So taking away the lotto, firing her off her job, whatever else the situation, none of that treats the problem. It is the fact that she has to redefine who she is, change her name, or give herself a broader definition of self and be able to actualize that. But the idea that something divine now having to be apologized for that's inadequate is totally a problem. And you have to understand the women maintain an industry, $18 billion a year in straightening their hair. Now, see, you have to understand that is a real problem because, first of all, it totally takes her out of her elements that she needs to be able to be here on the planet. You can't stay in the sun. You can't be in the rain. You can't be in the wind. You need sun and water and wind. So what do we have here? We have an addiction. That is an addictive process. So if you wanted to equate the crack pushers and the hair salons on the block, they were probably of the same number. And we have to deal with that. Now, there's no Koreans, anybody else, or whoever's making this synthetic hair, that definitely is like what the Creator has given you. So the key is that there is a self-imposed low esteem that causes these individuals to go through this discomfort on a regular basis. It's discomforting. You should see what they go through in these hair salons to get that stuff done. It's discomforting, and there's no need of lying about it. And as like I said, it's unnatural. You cannot be your natural self and sustain it. So therefore, it's like that automatically takes you out into a different element. And I learned that a long time ago, and I just really had to let that go. So I had to redefine myself. I had to move into a different awareness of what I meant to myself and why that was not going to be an issue in my life, because I felt that if I could not face myself as how I was created, it was a personal problem that really meant that there was always going to be a block between me and whatever I tried to relate to. So now we have the same issue with our relationship with our children. It's not a sincere one because we don't even come to them being ourselves. We have this problem with the relationships with our men because we don't come to them being ourselves. I have some women that tell me that their husband ain't never seen their real hair. I mean, that's incredible. So, what is he really loving? What is he really with? That this kind of limitation or esteem of self is extremely dangerous. And when a person withholds from themselves to that extent, how are they going to really give you their best? They lie every time they say they love you. How can they when they don't love themselves? And we need to stop really playing these games. This is what causes the diseases that we have. And we cannot look to anybody but ourselves to treat them. So, as I see these huge institutions propping up here talking about they're the hospitals and they can give you a new arm and somebody's liver and somebody's leg and whatever else, etc., it is totally unnecessary because you can regenerate any part of your body. And the proper thing to do is give you the information so you can access that part of your brain so that it can regenerate. But the idea that you're going to go in the garbage can and get somebody's dead body in the grave and put that inside yourself, totally no esteem. A lizard won't even do that. They recognize they can crawl off and get a new leg and a new tail. They don't need to go to the lizard graveyard, if there's such a thing, and get somebody else's. So here you are with a huge brain that has the capacity to put airplanes in the sky, space stations, and you're going to crawl off and get a dead carcass and put it in your body? There is a real problem, and nobody should be able to sell you any madness like that. They're going around here collecting blood, and I'm like, for what? Everybody makes their own every day. Every day. Why are you collecting blood? And it's amazing that people lay there and give theirs to be given to somebody else, and it's like, well, don't they look like you? Yeah, if you stick them with a pin, they have little red blood that comes out just right, because they make their own. So now, why is it that these people can't make their own? And they can. At least that's what I learned from the Jehovah Witnesses. I've seen some of them in really bad shape, but they've been willing to at least not take blood, and they live. Now, you know, of course, we're taught to harass them and do all kind of things to them in the hospital, that kind of thing, but it's been amazing. I've learned a lot of interesting things from my patients. They're my greatest teachers. I have patients that walk around and go to work every day with hemoglobins of 2. Now, my thing is that why do you want to walk around with hemoglobin of 2? Because no, it is not natural. And if you can get enough strength and energy to go to work every day and work 8 hours with a drop of blood in your body, why can't you just get to the real issue and allow your body to make all the blood you need? Because it's still a level of withholding. So it's like, you know, why walk around on one leg when you can have 2? If you get to the real issue as to why you lost the first one in the first place, now we can get us another one. Do you begin to understand what I'm saying? Is that this esteem issue, this lack of limitation of understanding who we are and what gifts we have are the reason for our suffering, and there's no institution outside of you that is going to be the answer to rid these problems. No, no, no. So it's no need to invest your energies in that when you already come here completely capable of being here indefinitely and totally being capable of being total master and mistress of this entire planet. But that requires a state of consciousness. That's the only thing that separates the weak from the strong. It's consciousness. It is consciousness, because truly I've seen people who've had half of a body be able to have much more transportation, be able to go and do more places than folks with a whole grown body. Now, see, that's incredible, because when you have a mind and an emotional body that's working, you can get anything done in this dimension. And I have seen people who have no arms and no legs who do all kind of awesome things, and we have people completely developed sitting up looking crazy. So what's the difference? It is your mindset. So it is very important to ask yourself why you think the way you think about yourself. Why do you not know how you feel about something? What have you been doing all this time that you aren't even aware about how you feel? Why don't you want to feel? Why are you overeating? Why are you taking drugs? Why are you working 18 hours a day instead of being at home? You know, these are the things you have to, because these are activities to keep you from really being in communication with yourself. That creates the toxin. That persistence in the same old behavior inhibits the purification process, and then yes, somebody has to cut it out of you or cut it off or poison it out of you, and this is why you have these diseases. So again, the cause originates from within: mental, emotional, conflict, lack of compatibility, lack of communication with self, and most of all, an unwillingness to assign yourself the proper esteem value. That's very, very important. So the name you call yourself, you have to be very clear about what that means, and if it doesn't contain all the definitions that should be under it, you need to get busy then augmenting it, or either get a new name. But the idea that you're going to settle for less is a no-no, because you cannot have a healthy body and do that. Thank you.
The name, we, the black peoples of the world, are the Kushite. We are of the empire of Ethiopia. We are Ethiopians. What a glorious name. What a glorious story. What a wonderful history to redefine, to weave back the unity of who we are, to restore that self-esteem. Reparation, the restoration, the healing of our people. It's all one. And every step that we make must be strategic. And as His Imperial Majesty said, it must have a strong foundation that will protect the next generation, give public welfare. So we're talking about creating sustainability. and not using our traumatization of lack of self-value to make us sell our birthright for a morsel of bread. Thank you, Chair. Floor is open.
To the chair.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I was listening listening to the video, the broadcast, I mean the presentation. And so it brought me forward as a youth and in Rastafari. And I remember my parents telling my siblings and I, at the time it was all girls, and that I and I are born royal, and that I and I covenant, I and I's locks is I and I covenant, I and I crown. And that was one of the reasons why from there I was standing at the time that and I cover and I glory and I crown, you know. And that I and I were born princesses and prince. And that when I and I reach into that stage where I and I would have been able to manage I and I self from the context of adulthood, and I would be called king and queens. So at one point, having reached that stage and having your own family, and to a large extent, inculcating that same principle, because their majesty, and as Ivan said, principle above all else. And they I understood it in the way in which they did, in kind of safeguarding the principle and the self-esteem, to not to allow any system to change that royalty that I and I were born with. It's an innate selflessness and an innate self-recognition of I and I's divine glory. But when I become adult and having my own family and so on, I saw within the community, and to keep my sanity, I had to recognize it, that it's a part of the systematic traumatization that and displacement that the system intentionally brought many of I and I's family member state of mind in, and that people were seeking to gain the title of kingship and queenship through different means, you know. And if some of I and I weren't grounded in I and ourselves, it probably would have displaced I and I further, more theoretically and psychologically. You find that, for instance, myself would say, I am a queen. I recognize that, and I recognize my fellow sisters as I and I's queen, and I and I's brethren as I and I's king, I and I's children as I and I prince and princesses. And so you'll find that there's a contention. And as I said, to keep my sanity, I recognize that there are traumatization on different levels until I and I are able to intentionally have these kind of discussion. The platform I do provide every Too Strong, the study group focusing on the words of their majesty. What do they mean to each individual, and how I and I can bring them into a oneness of consolidation in recognizing that platform that was originally laid for I and I, that I and I are royal, divine beings, the sun, the ray of the sun, and the stars, and the iris of the Kushite. So it just reminds me, and I give thanks for Rastafari, because I don't know where I would have been today if it wasn't for Rastafari. At one point, the women, I listened to the sisters who intentionally, from a formal and an academic perspective, engage into bringing forward greater fullness on her Divine Majesty, Empress Menen Asfa. And we talk about the relationship that she have had, intimate and personal and political relationship that she have had, and what does it mean in each time, in each dimension that she have been engaging in. At one point, growing up in the communities, not just in Rastafari, women would be looked at as doing something sinful if she should have more than one relationship over a period of time. And so a lot of clarity is being brought into why she's so divine and peculiar in her own way, and why their majesty would have chosen a characteristic of that nature. So I just wanted to share that because some of these things has been a conflict and throughout the years, and kind of bring a gap within the relationship. So having these discussions bring greater clarity to I and it will bring I and I closer to the importance of the relationship that their Majesty said unity is the accepted goal, and that discipline of the mind is the basic ingredients that bring I and I Irids in that oneness that recognize the affection of the Ethiopian power of the Isla Trinity through the throne room. Give thanks.
Yes, I. Yes, I. Chair, for me, I wanted to even say that, I once listened to, what's the brother? Listened to him and some sisters debate and argue online. The brother Samuel Keith, that died. And he was speaking in the American construct of the black woman, and he's speaking about the black man, that their unification, and he was using the value system of our oppression. And he said that a woman after a certain age, and if she's been married and had kids and this and that, she loses her value. And, he had a lot of men hurrah him on, and they were having this big debate, and it was more than just that. So as you were speaking, I was thinking about, one day I was about to post, and I said, well, I don't want to get in that debate because I don't feel I have to respond to the craziness. And I was going to post that Empress Menen, had, I believe it was 3 previous marriages. And I think she produced at least 2 children in each marriage before marrying His Majesty. And His Majesty had a previous relationship too, where he has a daughter. And the value principle of these days, how we look at each other, is so corrupt. That principle of the Queen Mother, the mission of upkeeping a nation, and also that Empress Menen represented the Kushite, and that to take the position of king, you have to be accepted by the rightful Kushite princess or queen. And so we miss really what our mission is by trying to define our life in the value systems of our oppressor. So it is very important that we see the examples given to us by His Imperial Majesty and by Empress Menen, and what their life meant and what did they give. Were they controlled by the definitions of value system of oppression? So I know we're closing, and I wanted to read again those words of His Imperial Majesty, just to put it back in everyone's mind as we close out. We must caution you that lasting progress can be built only on deep and enduring foundations. A strong and viable economy, expanding programs dedicated to the public welfare, the application of modern science and technology to the solutions of the problems which face us, and the improvement of the way of life of our people, the way of life of our people. But these in turn require an increasingly mature, rational, responsible attitude of mind and spirit, manifested in the approach which we take in the existence of our rights and obligations. So we have an obligation to protect the liberation of the next generation. We have an obligation to create the environment of healing and restoration so that our children may grow up in an environment free of control, free of the fight or flight by living under their oppressor. So we have major obligations. Hold on. Okay. Rational and responsible attitude of mind and spirit manifested in an approach which we take in the exercise of our rights and obligations, in the manner in which we search for solutions to the problems of our daily life, and in the way in which we arrange our relations with our fellow men. It is this mental attitude which is most essential if our nation is to continue to prosper and develop. We must become increasingly self-critical, increasingly willing to analyze our efforts to experiment, to admit our failures as we take pride in our successes. We must draw upon what is valuable and meaningful in our history and tradition, and merging this with the best in modern learning, creating a uniquely Ethiopian base on which to build. If the foundation which we lay today are not sound and strong, they will surely crumble tomorrow, and the future development of the nation will be endangered, and our efforts, however well intended, will have gone for naught. Give thanks.
To the chair.
Go ahead.
Give thanks. I love it. And I give thanks to the invitation. I give thanks to my sister Queen Ifea for mentioning IDOR and the study group that I continue to do for the past 18 years. And I give thanks to the minister for their works, mighty works, and I have full courage there to continue to do what they is doing. And they have full support. As I look at His Majesty words, where he said we have to become members of a new race. We must become bigger than we have ever been. That's self-esteem. More courageous greater in spirit, that's self-esteem, larger in outlook, that's self-esteem. So His Majesty is aware of I and I condition, and He gives us solutions to those things, healing solutions, repairing solutions. His Majesty goes on to say, unity is our greatest asset and we must exploit it to the fullness. So I and I is extending that arm of unity to my brothers and my sisters here. And once again, I give thanks for the invite. Rastafari bless. Give thanks.
Rastafari, I give thanks. Guatemala,
Rise your name and prioritize yourself. How you talk, rise your name. Drive along with just to see you. Hectic how to live again. Yeah, for the day-to-day struggle we'll bend. Struggle we'll bend. Story. Yeah. As you just said, yeah. Fighting to keep between the I and I communication. Yeah. Watch your girl. Your lines bring the angel man up, down from heaven to defend, and I kings to descend, as well as some never to rise again. With them sweetest of the sad tales to tell. But make no mistake, that's them. Like I said, all jokes aside, dumpling. Yeah, for the italics way when them perishing. Yeah, hey, me not lie. Right now, spectacular, you're flourishing. Hey, all when the mind work condition. Procreation of the foundation link. Yeah, longest of the days in the world sunspark. If you not price your name and prioritize yourself how you talk. Price your name and prioritize yourself how you talk. Hey, that's the bar I like the safest of place in the yard. Some of them just can't help. Hey, if you stay up, them busy body. Hey, busy body talk. Yeah, the young and the IT full, pure sacrificial. This is how them church man attack. Hey, if it overs, yeah. Root protection in the edge to laugh. Yeah, exposure to impress. Transylvania fluid. Yeah. Certain things where I and I must have nothing to do with. Aye. So I and I say give thanks for this, yes. Right, rise your name. Prioritize yourself how you talk. Rise your name. Prioritize yourself how you talk. Drive a long way just to see you. Yeah. Hectic how to leave so soon again. For the day-to-day struggle we'll bear. Yeah, story. I'm saying I don't really want it to end. Yeah, price your name and prioritize yourself how you talk. Hey, fall in the rain and not manners after dark. Price your name. Yeah. But like I said, all jokes aside, don't blame. Hey, everybody heading for the idolists. Where when they're perishing, hey, time in our life. Hey, right now, spectacular, you flourish it. Hey, all when the mind work, punish it. Oh, appropriation of the foundation link. Saying longest of days in the world sunspot. If you not prize your name and prioritize yourself how you talk. Prize your name and prioritize yourself how you talk. Me tell you again now, Rastafari like the safest place in the heart. Yeah, some of them just can't help but stir up their busy body.
Yes, I praise your name. Praise your name. And what's the prize? We are Ethiopians. We are Ethiopians. And that is the prize in our name. So we uphold that heritage and we live in that reality, not to beg nobody for nothing. But we're going to prize our name. Yes, I. Queen Efia, go ahead.
Yes, I give thanks. I was listening to the words. I've never listened to it in the way in which I listened, and it brought me forward once more because I and I are utilizing the concept of the Sankofa and bringing, retrieving and bringing forward to the sensuality of our nice divine self. And so, and I use the concept, word, sound, and power. We said glory to words, glory to sound, and glory to the power that it brings. As the Imple said, self-esteem. The words that we use to each other. Once I take on this strad, certain things is a total no-no. So in my mind, I've conditioned myself to say, if I hear someone speak to, whether they are in agreement or disagreement, there are certain things that is a total no-no. And it brought me right forward again to the throne of Ethiopia, that it can be reseated, because their majesty manifests the fulfillment of the wholesomeness of the concept of the soul. And so the words that we use, whether it's in ourselves or outward, it's very important that I and I recognize how we are communicating with each other, the importance of the word, because as them say, the middle finger might mean something, one thing here, or in another culture, another thing. So I and I have to assess and take some time to listen to each other, because sometimes our emotions take us into different state of self. And so I just wanted to connect with the song with Vaughn Benjamin, because I and I were talking about him today as well. The name, know how you communicate in your words that you're using, word, sound, and power, and the energy that it brings to I and I. Give thanks.
Yes, I. Give thanks. Give thanks. Yes, I. Anyone else? Floor is open. Are we closing out? No. Well, it was wonderful to have everyone in. We're going to close out with the national anthem, then we'll close out with the prayer. Yes, I. Give thanks.
Got to be in that land of Ethiopia. It's the black man kingdom. Ethiopia, the land of our fathers, the land where our gods of to be. Like peace to our hive swiftly gather, Jah children are gathered to thee. With our red, gold, and green floating o'er us, and our emperor, the shield
Yes, I give thanks. Come in the name of the Most High. Give thanks and praise to the Mother, and to the Father, and to the Spirit. We give thanks and praise to all ancestors, known and unknown. We are grateful for this moment in time. We're grateful for this opportunity. Grateful for this learning experience. Grateful for this therapeutic experience to learn about ourselves, understand ourselves, and learn about all the keys given to us by our elders, by our leaders, by our great ones who have set down a standard, who have lived up to their responsibilities to set for us a blueprint to live out to the best of our ability, for the best of our ability, for the best of our happiness, for the best of our sovereignty. So we're grateful and we are humbled to be the ones who have heard the call of the Most High, to hear the things to bring us to change, to bring us to a new reality, to give us a new life, new hope, new strength, and a reinvigoration of who we are. So we understand and we look within, as the Mother Mole told us the secret as to where it is. So we give thanks and praise for the Most High, giving all of us that strength from within to come out and be our crown. We give thanks. Everyone have a wonderful night. Amen. Sila.
The crucis salam. Lekul Lakimo. Aliyah.
Aliyah.
Bless the Lord, give thanks.